I'm such an idiot, Mortarion thought, to actually wrestle with a titan. He felt leaden, his eyelids fluttering, blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Still, he forced himself to his feet. He was death guard, unyielding. Even weak, he refused to fall. 7 ribs. He could feel 7 of them broken. Around him, the battlefield had become a chorus of fragmentation. Men screaming, engines screaming, the close crackle of las guns, and the deeper staccato of autocannons. The Psyker Titan was closing fast, its form already the size of a knight and bristling with psychic menace. Mortarion tightened his grip on his scythe and breathed shallow, ragged breaths. Relying on the body of an imperial demigod, he dodged the Titan's strike. The Warhounds and the Death Guard used the ruined terrain to their advantage, swarming from all directions. Their firepower was laughably small against a Titan, but they tried to keep the Primarch out of its grasp. Concentrate heavy fire, Mortarion rasped. Knights thundered in the sky. Even a Titan descending would take time. He felt as if his arm were broken and slumped his shoulder, watching a lemon rust charge like a mad warrior into the open. The Psyker Titan was distracted. The Warhounds had bought time. Mortarion stood more upright, a cold determination in him that the Death Guard had been bred to hold. The Warhounds, the furious war cries, were the last bright sparks of their existence. Oedipus came tearing up on a bike and pulled in beside Mortarion. He'd never understood why the Death Guard split armored units and infantry the way they did. The Warhounds, the only organized armored force present, were desperately tying the Titan down. Since Angron's return, they had never taken such losses. "Your Highness, get on!" Oedipus shouted. Mortarion didn't hesitate, but climbed on. "Warhounds, can you get me closer?" he asked, eyes fixed on the rearing form of the Psyker Titan. If it was the size of a knight now, if he could close the distance with his scythe, Oedipus flushed with confusion and alarm. His orders were to extract the Primarch, not deliver him into a Titan's maw. "Your Highness." Mortarion's gloved hand shot out and yanked Oedipus off the bike. The rider flew, skidding across rubble. Before he could curse, Mortarion fired the engine. Dust billowed. Oedipus lay on the ground and watched the Primarch charge off into a price some would call madness. A Titan is felled by a Titan, not a man, and yet only an imperial demigod stood between it and destruction. "Tassus, pull the Warhounds and Death Guard back!" Mortarion barked over the comms. "Understood. We will lure it," Tassus replied. Mortarion fell silent and recalculated in his head, predicting the Titan's movements, timing its psychic ripples. He watched armored columns become wreckage, men burned and crushed. He closed his eyes and waited for the Titan to turn. When it did, he abandoned the bike, leapt high, and his scythe flashed cold and bright. A psychic gust slammed into him. He was hurled like a rag into a ruined building. The Death Guard, firing as they ran, converged on the smoking wreck where Mortarion had fallen. For a moment, the Primarch's fate hung unknown. Oedipus and a handful of Terran veterans ran with them. As Space Marines, they understood how vital a Primarch was to a legion. They dashed down the road, blind to the Titan's barrel turning toward them. Oedipus steadied himself, breathing hard, raised his bolter. "For the Legion Co-Lord and His Highness Angron," he roared and fired. The bolter round cratered the Titan's void shield. Then the sky filled with thunder. A blue and white stormbird dove in, followed by another and another, dropships and a rain of ordnance. The first stormbird smashed into the Titan, its shields flaring. The second, the third, the fifth collided in succession until shockwaves rippled across the field. A calm, muffled voice cut through the noise and into everyone's head via the comms. The system AI, taking command of the available assets and pouring them onto the battlefield. "All personnel, I am Angron, now assuming command." Angron's voice was flat and cold. He looked at the shredded warhounds lying like broken insects, and his eyes went unusually hard. "The nail, I will kill it myself," he said. The comms spat orders and reports. The Ashwolf and Storm Legion were en route. Lothara Salin would bring redemption to the coordinates. Mago would bring the Fang of the Hounds. Khorne and Gel moved to clear out the Death Guard. A final, annoyed message flickered through. "Mortarion wasn't dead. Go slap him awake." With each command the system AI issued, Angron's grip tightened on his chain axe, and he ran for the ruins. Shells detonated above the Titan and stunned the watching Death Guard. What kind of onslaught was this? One after another, vessels struck the Psyker Titan until its void shield was threadbare. The great machine revved, trying to flee the crater it had been smashed into, but vehicle swarms, stormbirds, tanks, dropcraft arrived under the AI's direction and picked up stranded humans as they advanced. On a heavy land raider, Oedipus sat beside Erlon, whose face was a mask of blood. Tasis and Khorne of the 7th Company watched in silence. The comms crackled again as Gel, Warhound's Archon, took over. "This is Gel. From now on, I give the orders. You execute them. Anyone who balks can withdraw. Our mission, cover the 2 highnesses and avenge our brothers and cousins." His voice was raw and cold. The Warhounds had suffered grievously. Gel's hatred for the Death Guard, hot and complicated as it was, would not be free of duty. The crushed men of both sides would be avenged. Mortarion slid from the ruins and found himself at Angron's side. He tasted metal and smoke in his mouth. His bones screamed. A stinging slap cracked across his face, and the world snapped to clarity. "Are you alive?" Angron demanded, standing over him, palms still raised. Mortarion blinked up. Angron's smile was small and humorless. There was a respirator strapped to his face that Mortarion recognized, his own. Mortarion pressed a trembling hand to his face and realized his respirator was missing. Angron had taken it, and now, with a rougher motion, handed it back. "Mortarion, get up," Angron said. "You can't die here." He hauled Mortarion unceremoniously to his feet. Pain flared through broken ribs and shattered limbs as Mortarion tried to breathe through the returned respirator. He tasted blood and grit. Through the mask, the battlefield was a broken poem. The Titans still fought in the center, but bombardment had left it crippled. "Your men are falling back in order," Angron observed. "I'm glad you're still breathing." "I'm used to facing death," Mortarion managed. "Who isn't?" Angron countered. "But you aren't supposed to be dead. Look at yourself." He shifted the respirator, watched blood darken the seal. Then Angron shoved Mortarion's war scythe into his hands, and something almost like a grin tugged at the corner of his mouth, said, "I don't think we've ever worked together. Let's try not to kill each other while the rest of them die, eh?" He barked into the comms. "Gel, Khorne, the 13th echelon, move to the designated position." Khorne answered from a roaring tank engine. Kargas stood nearby bearing a banner, steel pouring forward with them. The Titan, reduced to knight size and trying to stir, felt the pressure of 1,000 wheels and wings closing. Gel's voice cut across the channel again, fierce and uncompromising. "You will carry out my orders. Cover the highnesses and avenge our dead. Execute." Mortarion, steadying himself on his scythe, looked at Angron. "What are you planning?" "Stay behind me," Angron said simply. "I need you." Mortarion felt something like a current go through him at that. He nodded. They had both suffered losses, different, terrible things, but in the smoke and metal of the ruin, their wills aligned. The battle was far from over. "I'm right behind you, brother." Mortarion nodded once. A strange charisma emanated from Angron now, a feeling that oddly reminded him of Horus. Angron let out a war cry, grinned, and then, much to Mortarion's astonishment, started running straight at the Psyker Titan. "No, this is suicide," Mortarion thought, and followed. He had barely registered the thought when a shell screamed past his head. The scorching rush of hot air made him flinch. For a second he wondered which bastard had aimed at them. Then the heat intensified. Shells came at them from every direction, as if to bury them and the Titan alive. Facing death straight on is one thing, being cut down by your own people was another. Mortarion could imagine the headlines. The first Primarch killed by his own. The thought was obscene. The Psyker Titan had tracked the imperial demigod charging at it. It was just bringing its gun barrels to bear when a volley of shells struck it, making it list and molten metal spill from a torn joint. From above the crater, dozens of vehicles erupted, exchanging fire like burrowing animals. The Psyker Titan opened up, trying to destroy them, but System AI's tendrils were being blunted by the Titan's psychic emanations. System AI hated psychic interference. It fixed its sensors on the stubborn Titan. "Unit 2, charge," it barked. "Always." Angron answered, lifted his voice into a god of war roar, and leapt. The impact of his cry hit the Titan's massive feet. Sparks flew where his boots struck steel. The Psyker Titan bristled with fury and slammed a steel foot down to crush him. "Loading," a voice reported. "Unit 8 module loaded. Unit 2, receive data." System AI's tone had gone tight. It was riskier now. Angron had never felt like this before. Something else had attached itself to Angron's senses. Conrad Kurz's power. Unit 8, Kurz's module, had come online. With it, Angron could read the next moves of the terror-bound automaton as if they were his own. His feet dug into the ground and he drew his World Eater's plasma gun. Each step gouged the earth. Mortarion held his breath, scythe swinging. Hundreds of slashing arcs flashed from Mortarion's blade. Steel flakes fell from the Titan's armor. "Duck!" Angron snapped. Mortarion obeyed and crouched as a shell bloomed overhead like fireworks. The blast was snuffed by the Titan's void shield. What should have protected the enemy now shielded them. Madman, Mortarion thought as his chain axe whirred. Angron vaulted. The knight-sized Titan swung an arm to crush him midair. A blue shockwave licked out. It should have been a clean hit, but Angron grazed past it, plasma gun singing. With a clang, he drove his God of War's roar into the Titan's cockpit. Even behind the thick armor, the pilot felt the fury. "Get down!" Angron ordered as he hit the deck. Missiles spouted from the Titan's shoulders. Angron rolled, slid to Mortarion's side. "You're still alive." "Not dead," Mortarion panted, lungs filling with sulfurous air. His brother had given him too many surprises. "This thing, it's like a turtle shell." Angron glanced at the plasma gun recharging. 13 seconds left. System AI was cranking cooling beyond safe limits. It might blow, but for the moment, it gave them another chance. He looked at the Titan's slightly buckled arm. "How many hits can you take now?" he asked. "Indefinitely," Mortarion answered through clenched teeth. He refused to show weakness in front of Angron, though blood was beginning to slick his palms. Angron noticed but didn't care. "The warhounds will give us cover," Angron said. "I'll call it, give you the opening." "I won't kill you," he added with a crooked joke. "This blasphemous machine uses sorcery," Mortarion said, remembering the psychic shock that had knocked him back earlier. "Calculate its trajectory. I'll handle the sorcery." Angron stamped a deep pit into the ground and charged again. Mortarion drew a breath, tasted the sharp sting of the air, and followed through the pain. "Resilience," he told himself. Images flashed through Angron's vision, molten metal, the hammer of a robotic arm, the quaking earth. He rode the steel arm, struck sparks as his war cry bit into alloy, and a psychic wave rolled out like a ripple. "Khorne!" Angron shouted. "Watch for sorcery!" It was a warning to Mortarion. He planted his scythe into the ground. The first psychic wave tore past, and then a thunderous blast slammed into the Psyker Titan from afar. "Fire!" Khorne's response rolled across the battlefield. The first round cracked the Titan's void shield, making it ripple. The shield was weakening. "Shoot!" Khorne bellowed again, ignoring the crew's misgivings. The autoloader rammed another shell into the breach, and the second thunder shook the world. Under the warhound's long, grinding, suppressive fire, Angron slammed his weapon into the cockpit again. Steel creaked and split. A gap opened. "Get out!" Angron screamed, eyes bloodshot, filled with a power that made his bones hum. Something from the void surged into him. He heard, inside his skull, the whine and hammer of nails. Something within him fractured, splintered, then the color of blood flared and receded. Buzz, another psychic shock. Angron held his God of War's roar out like a shield and leapt. The Titan's arm swung. It looked unmissable. Angron did not dodge. He raised the plasma gun. "Die!" he roared. A green blade, Mortarion's war scythe, appeared in the air as if conjured. Mortarion took the hit meant for Angron and was thrown like a rag into the dirt, blue pillars of energy stabbing the space where he'd been. He hit hard, pain clearing his mind. Angron hit the ground some distance away. Mortarion watched the Titan's cockpit falter and go dark. Succeed? Mortarion's muddied thoughts asked. Angron pushed himself up, breathing hard. He looked at the plasma gun in his hand. He could tell by the hum that this thing was not meant for mere mortals. "What just happened?" he asked. "There's a virus," System AI reported flatly. "I'm cleaning it." System AI had just purged something that had come with the peculiar blessings of a certain red African man, and it had cost him cycles. The machine's sensors flared as it turned to scan the Psyker Titan. "Angron, run!" System AI suddenly screamed. "Huh?" Angron glanced up. The images pouring into his mind blurred and multiplied. The Titan shrank before his eyes, from knight-sized to warhound-sized, then the space around it tore as if reality itself had been sliced. Teleportation. Angron flung his weapon up. The Psyker Titan disgorged missile pods that spat rockets in every direction and aimed a melt-a-gun at Angron at point-blank range. "Damn it, you've killed me," System AI spat. Then something detonated. Mortarion watched, horror-struck, as the Titan's weapon swallowed Angron in searing flame and energy. He staggered to his feet, bracing himself on his scythe. "Angron! Angron!" He screamed and charged, reckless now, feeling death brush his heels. Heat roared around where Angron had fallen. His helmet was long gone. The air around him shimmered with gushing energy. He felt suffocated, but not in pain. He felt data cables, dense, humming tendrils, coil about him like a living cocoon, like the butcher's nails. They wrapped, ensheathed, held him together. He survived. System AI barked at the sight like a thing in a vice. It didn't have many data tendrils left to spare. It hadn't planned on this, hadn't expected what Angron did. Dazed, the electrical stimulations rattled through Angron's nerves, and he came back to himself with a grin. "I thought you'd come online," someone said, dry, tired. "I'm not someone's father. I don't have the time to play Avenger," System AI retorted. Then, to someone else he addressed as Hypnos. "Hypnos, I'm fine over here. Proceed as planned." System AI felt damned to be stuck with Angron, this self-righteous bastard, but in the end, it was still the one cleaning up Angron's mess. "Pick up your weapon. You are enhanced. Unit 2, get him." The System AI fed ravenously on the tangled cables. It had been designed after the last Dark Angel's weapons strike. This module was made specifically for moments like this, although the AI knew it still needed work. On the lip of the gouged crater, Tassus watched the place where Angron burned. He watched his gene father charging toward the Psyker Titan. The Death Guard couldn't sit still, but the Warhounds remained eerily calm. Tassus couldn't understand their indifference. "Khorne, cover the Reaper," he barked. Whatever was running through the Warhounds' minds, Tassus had to get Mortarion out. "Erlon, I don't care what methods you use. Keep these Death Guard locked down." Gel roared over the comms. He was shaken at Angron's plight, but Hypnos had assured him the Co-Lord and Angron were safe, and that had to be enough. Erlon rose and stepped directly between Tassus and the descent. He stared at the captain. "You cannot pass." "Cousin, our gene father's fighting down there while we stand here." "This is an order." "Whose order?" Tassus met Erlon's expressionless face with a hard look. Artillery thudded and screams of distant weaponry rolled over the crater. The usually impassive faces of the Death Guard finally showed emotion. "By order of the 12th Legion Commander, His Highness Angron." Erlon snapped, drawing the chainsword at his hip. The Warhounds tightened ranks. "What are you trying to do?" Tassus shouted at them. They were committing murder, murdering two of the Emperor's scions. Oedipus drove his sword into the earth and stepped forward. No one would stop the plan of the Co-Lord and His Highness Angron. They had paid too much already. "You can pass, over our corpses." Oedipus planted his feet. Tassus raised his power scythe. He did not want to blight his legion with treachery. Erlon barked a counter-order. Scores of weapons trained on the Death Guard, the two forces locked in a brutal standoff. Then Angron's voice split the field, a wild, bestial roar, and suddenly the Warhounds' faces softened as if a sedative had been administered. They lifted their heads, proud and alert, looking at Tassus and the other Death Guard as if they'd seen something monstrous and magnificent. "Oedipus." Yochuka's voice came quietly. Oedipus and Erlon turned at the same time and fell silent. Chaotic cables tore from the wreckage and coalesced behind Angron into a pair of enormous, burning wings. Even beside a Psyker Titan, Angron looked reborn from flame, smaller in scale perhaps, but no less terrifying. Flames licked along the cables, and psychic energy thrummed through the air. Angron drank in the emotions around him like a beast feeding. The molten cables ran like lava and dripped onto the ground. Angron raised the God of War's roar in hand. Mortarion watched him and felt the shape of a demon return to the world. Dense filaments crawled across Angron's face and finally formed a mask. When crimson light flared in his eyes, Mortarion saw, miracle or madness, Angron was flying. Heat blistered at Angron's scalp. Steam vented in great white plumes. A cold, mechanical voice declared, 3 minutes. You only have 3 minutes. The System AI had poured every module it could into Angron's mind. Gilliman's sharpened logic, Kurz's piercing foresight. "I'll deal with him in 2 minutes." Angron snarled as cables streamed behind him like feathers. The AI worried. The engines propping Angron's body were thin and weak. They generated monstrous heat. The AI had to bleed that heat away while still trying to breach the Psyker Titan's machine spirit. Angron dove. The Psyker Titan flinched, but just as his axe arced for the cockpit, a wave of psychic fluctuation rolled out from the Titan. Fear, foreign and hot, rose in Angron. The system AI, feeding on that fear, logged it with relish. Excellent food. Angron only grinned and struck. The God of War's roar crashed into the cockpit, splitting metal. Mortarion, the AI warned. There's a crack on the Titan's left leg you just opened. Several armor-piercing rounds will strike there in 3 seconds. You need to sever it. Ignore the shells. Run! Another command cut over the comms. The system AI ran calculations, then flung a command to Khorne. Khorne did not hesitate and ordered the guns to fire. To the horrified eyes of the Death Guard, the warhounds loosed shells at their Primarch. It was murder. Explosions roared. Shockwaves sandwiched Mortarion, but not a splinter struck him. Emerging like some gray wraith from the smoke, he drove his war scythe into a steel support. The metal screamed and began to fail. Pain tore through his arms. He knew they were ruined, yet he watched Angron thrown back by psychic backlash and ground his teeth. Tenacity, he howled. The support cracked and sheared. Shells shivered past the falling Angron as he looked down at the collapsing Psyker Titan. He thought of the Deshia arena. This gouge in the earth was an arena, and his deeds had been witnessed here, by his scions, by the Death Guard. Beside him were the Nail and Mortarion, his battle brothers. Glory, this was glory. Stop thinking about your damned arena. 1 minute 50 seconds left. The system AI snapped into his head, siphoning his thoughts. The AI felt the interface heat up as it generated the data. Angron gasped and rocketed past Mortarion, who stood with arms twisted grotesquely. He is still breathing, the system AI reported. Angron abandoned inspecting Mortarion's condition. He couldn't afford it. Explosions and fireworks made the sky a carnival of violence. The Titan tried to contract and hide. Emotions. I need more emotions. Just a little more, the system AI demanded, almost pleading. It puzzled Angron. Where was he supposed to conjure those feelings from now? Gel, listen to my command, Angron screamed as he leapt onto the Titan's hull, dodging a final crushing blow. Victory was within reach. On the ground, the Death Guard had finally begun to move. Seeing their Gene Father standing alone on the field, each man stirred and started to gather in silence, intent on retrieving him. Khorne watched them form ranks and heard Gel's latest order crack through. Erlon, see the Death Guard captain beside you? Tell them. Erlon froze when Khorne's message reached him. He watched the Death Guard close in, looked long at the tense Oedipus at his flank, and then waved him forward. Oedipus came. His face swelled with emotion. He inhaled, and his voice shook. Are you certain, Centurion Erlon? Erlon nodded with a flatness that made Oedipus's blood run cold. Oedipus approached Tassus and the others, bracing himself as if expecting to be torn apart. He opened his mouth. Stop moving. Death Guard, your Gene Father is dead. You can retrieve the body when this is all over. The Death Guard watched him in complete silence. Their eyes were hollow. From Tassus to Khorne, pain and grief and hatred poured off their ranks like a toxic fog. Without warning, Tassus's fist collided with Oedipus's face. Oedipus took the blow and spat a mouthful of blood, but his expression went savage. Let us pass. Let's fight. It's not as if we've never fought other legions. Oedipus snapped and kicked Tassus hard in the chest. Tassus lurched back 2 steps, tears tracking down his cheeks. The Death Guard stepped forward in lockstep. Commanders on both sides bellowed orders. Death Guard, advance! Warhounds, hold the line. Couldn't you have used a slightly more proper method? Why provoke them? The system AI complained as it sucked in the raw pain that flowed from Angron. Where was I supposed to find proper methods? Angron shot back as he came down over the cockpit and saw the close-range cannon pivot to face him. Cables smeared over the barrel, and the system AI began to worm itself into the Titan's machine spirit. Inside the cockpit, the pilot sensed danger and spun the Titan wildly on its belly. Hurry up and smash it for me, the AI urged. Angron answered with a war cry and hammered at the fissure. Each blow thudded into the pilot's heart like death's knuckles. Steel buckled and the armor peeled open. A fist-sized hole yawned. Cables pried it wider. Angron and the thing inside the cockpit stared at each other. It was not a normal human. The pilot's skull was a grotesque tumor, Madame Arnaud being incubated, her brain twisted and bleeding with psychic power. From her burst a black barrier of suffering that clawed at Angron's mind. Angron did not speak. He brought his axe down and blood sprayed across busted controls. The system AI had finished penetrating the bulk of the Psyker Titan's systems. "The Blood Angel's fleet has arrived. I may disappear for a few days," it said without irony. "I hope Unit 8's module actually works," another voice chimed. Disappear for a few days? The remark puzzled Angron until a wet, wrong sound reached his ears, the human gasping. "Let's die together," someone croaked. Aboard a blood-red Stormbird, an Imperial demigod paced the cabin and could feel the unease radiating from every allied ship. The Death Guard and the Warhounds both scrambled, their fates unknown. Sanguinius, perfect, angelic, stood in the turbulent cabin and watched the war below with a face tightened by worry. Perhaps they could still make it, he thought. Then the Stormbird's alarm howled. A pale pillar of light stabbed into the sky and an impossibly dense black mass spewed upward. Sanguinius straightened, every fiber alert, and rose to his feet. The tightness in his chest grew like a fist. Through gritted teeth, Angron ordered the pilot to push the Stormbird through the shockwave. The craft lurched. He took a breath and watched a small black speck hurtle toward them. For a moment, it might have been a bird, then it resolved into a person. Impact shattered the cockpit glass. Alarms screamed. A quick, familiar voice cut out over the intercom. "I'm going offline now." The system AI went silent. A sharp pang picked at Angron's chest. Someone in Blood Angel's colors moved toward him. Angron managed a crooked grin. "Have you ever seen a flying acrobat?" "Sire?" The voice was warm and soft. Sanguinius stepped in, his golden hair framing a calm, almost sculpted face. Angron was half inside the cockpit, half out, clinging where the crash had thrown him. "How about you come inside first?" Angron asked, bewildered. Sanguinius hesitated a long moment. He'd never expected to meet Angron like this. "The engine's dead," a pilot shouted. Worse news arrived in a breath. The Stormbird had made an emergency landing against a lower-level hive building. The pilot's skill had kept them from tumbling into the spires. Sanguinius helped Angron out once the craft rested. Pain radiated through Angron's body. His butcher's nails had not calmed. The wound in his head still pulsed. The system AI was overloaded. Angron could sense its frantic, scattered processes. A tangle of data conduits had been severed in the fight. The AI could perceive the outside now, but all the warning tones had consumed it. It would take, by its calculations, at least half a month to stabilize. Sanguinius' expression darkened. He hadn't expected such sudden violence after conquering an enemy world. They had rushed here, only to be shot down immediately on arrival by Angron's own battle. The Blood Angel's golden armor caught the weak light. White feathered wings trembled behind him, throwing small shadows. Angron, who still smelled of hot metal and blood, tried to wipe the grime on his chest against Sanguinius' pristine tabard. Sanguinius noticed and did not recoil. Instead, his voice was gentle, almost hypnotic. "A Psyker Titan," Angron said, answering the look. "A Psyker Titan?" Sanguinius echoed, puzzled. Angron gave a half-laugh at himself. Childish, Sanguinius thought, and yet when he saw how beaten Angron was, there was no room for resentment. He helped Angron take a steadying step. The system AI, in its last useful moments, had protected Angron. It had pulled together fragments of raw emotion, pain from the Death Guard, rage, grief, and used them defensively. Emotion was a potent fuel. It had bought Angron a chance. The AI had decided Mortarion would suffer more than Angron. At least that was how its calculations ran. A blue and white Stormbird settled nearby. Gel and Khorne leapt out, heavy-footed and anxious. They drew close the instant they saw Angron. "Gel," Sanguinius inclined his head. "My lord Sanguinius," Gel returned with a bow, attempting steadiness while his eyes burned with worry. "Are you too close?" Angron asked, a little unnerved by the sudden familiarity. "In a way," Sanguinius said without evasion. "The Blood Angels and the Warhounds are sent to the same hellish fronts. Even if it isn't spoken, comparisons will be made, openly and behind backs." "So you're rivals? Shall I push you away and challenge you to a duel?" Angron joked. Sanguinius blinked and smiled. "Stand steady first." Gel's face was taut. Captera had failed to contact the Legion co-lord. The arena was still intact, but their co-lord's condition was unknown. Angron gave Gel a reassuring look, and the warhound's nod of fear eased slightly. "How is Mortarion?" someone asked, voice low. "He was thrown clear by the shockwave," Angron answered. "At the moment, His Highness Mortarion won't be getting out of bed." Gel's mind went back to the Death Guard digging the Reaper out of the ruins several kilometers away, to Mortarion unearthed, dazed, and muttering the same word over and over: resilience. The Warhounds and the Death Guard had stopped their fighting in the mid-levels to gather their dead, but then the Death Guard found many of their brothers' bodies missing. When they confronted the Warhounds, the reply had been blunt: "We'll give them back once we find them." Tassus nearly hurled the chemical canister he carried at Erlon for that answer. Gel didn't linger on petty theatrics. They needed to keep their dead intact. On the way to locate the Gene Father, Gel had asked Hypnos for help. Hypnos' reply had been blunt: "In this area, Theseus and I are still apprentices. The co-lord taught us this technique, but we need practice." Hypnos would practice, using the bodies of the Death Guard if necessary. It was cruel, but survival had a way of making cruel necessities. Sanguinius listened, concerned. "Your losses are severe," he said finally. "Leave the rest to us, the Blood Angels." "The situation on this planet is worse than you think," Angron said, looking at Sanguinius with a strange mixture of frustration and admiration. He had never understood how the Emperor had managed to make Sanguinius so faultlessly beautiful. "Gel, send the intelligence to the Blood Angels. The Warhounds have no wish to compete for glory we never sought, brother," Gel answered. "The Death Guard may think differently." Angron thought of Mortarion's men, grim infantry, full of poisons and grimmer strategies. He could not fathom Mortarion's stubborn insistence that his sons fight on foot across the worst of the battlefields. Sanguinius' silence stretched. His relationship with Mortarion had never been easy. Understanding and truth were separated by a thin, sometimes rigid membrane. All of them were the Emperor's sons, and yet power had warped each into strange, uncompromising individuals. Sanguinius sighed. I suggest the Death Guard and the Warhounds form an echelon together to support your advance," Angron interrupted. "Death Guard 1st Company with the Warhounds 7th Echelon. Both are fierce fighters. At least this way we all share the burden and the glory." It was the last counsel the nail allowed him before it fell silent. Sanguinius nodded slowly and helped Angron into a seat inside the Warhound's Stormbird. "Can you fly?" Angron asked, half curious, half weary. "It's tiring, my brother." Sanguinius laughed softly. He was amused by Angron's bluntness. Angron's voice turned melancholic. "I used to have wings too once. A Psyker Titan took them from me." Gel watched and then turned to relay a new command. He met Angron's eye. "Tell Korga, the operation can begin." Hypnos took the message like a conductor receiving a baton. Operation commencing. Thesis for the co-lord. For the co-lord. On board the Redemption, in the 13th Echelon's office, Inzar Tyrus rose, as he always did. As he moved to step outside, he found Korga waiting in the doorway. They stared at one another for a long second. Inzar Tyrus could feel the Wraith Company's shadowed warriors watching from the room's corners. Rumors followed the Warhounds like a scent. They were said to be like the Night Lords in some ways, efficient, brutal. But since arriving with them, Inzar Tyrus had stayed within the 13th Echelon's narrow remit. Khan had given him paperwork and administrative duties. It had drained him, day after day. He bristled. "Korga," he said simply. Korga regarded the devout Inzar Tyrus with an unreadable expression. Theseus, an inner voice, or a shard of some other mind, whispered from somewhere inside Inzar's head. "He's smiling falsely at you, that bastard. Can you punch him in the face? I find it disgusting." Theseus's words crawled under his skin. Inzar kept his own practiced smile in place, a smile he used on mortals and brothers alike. When he saw Korga draw out the Book of Truth from his hand, his eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Korga's face did not change. He looked at Inzar Tyrus, waited. Section 105, "I've read your work. So has Khorne." Khorne was furious about it. Inzar Tyrus's heart dropped. Khorne was furious? What did that mean? As Angron's favorite aide, Khorne was to Inzar, second only to Corfin. Inzar had always wanted Khorne to understand the greatness of the Eightfold Path, but certainly not this way. "Do you want to die?" Korga asked slowly. Inzar shook his head. He had no desire to die. He still had a great cause to complete. "I yearn for the great beings your book describes," he said. "Tell me how to gain their favor." Calgar stepped forward and offered his hand, grinning as if inviting Inzar to follow. Inzar watched Korga silently. He wasn't a fool. He couldn't believe Korga on Korga's word alone, and Korga knew that. "Come with me," Korga said. "If you don't want to die, come with me. The 13th echelon is already looking for you." Korga raised one dark brow, smiled, withdrew his hand, and began to turn away. Inzar hesitated, then followed. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. "Jel and Khorne have received too much favor," Korga said. "If they can be favored, why can't I?" Inzar's disdain flared. He couldn't believe Korga's motive was so petty, but he kept the expression small. Theseus, the voice that constantly nagged inside Korga's mind, commented on Inzar's face, and Korga snapped his helmet visor shut. "What do you think, Inzar Tyrus? Do you want to stay here? Or how do I know if what you're saying is true?" Inzar asked, suspicion sharpening his features. Before Korga could answer, a thunderous voice cut through the corridor. "Where is Inzar Tyrus?" Inzar stiffened. "Why don't you go ask Khorne?" "I was sent by Lord Lorgar, and I don't believe Khorne would order this. There must be a misunderstanding," Korga shouted, forcing a plausible tone into his voice. Inzar believed a third of it, mistrusting the rest. He didn't think the warhounds could be fooled so easily, and then Khorne's men appeared. "Found you." Khorne loomed from a corridor corner and froze when he saw the phantoms. "Korga, why are you here? Didn't Lord Angron send you to attack the Hive City in the lower world with the Death Guard First Company?" Khorne pulled an axe from his waist and crouched forward like a hunting hound, grinning ferociously. If Korga didn't have a good answer, then, "I want Inzar Tyrus." Korga's voice was steady. At once, Khorne lashed out, knocking down two phantoms at the front. The rest of the 13th echelon surged. Their clash was an ignition. The 7th and 13th echelons in the corridor flared into anger. Theseus, surprised in Korga's head, protested that this was supposed to be only for show. He hadn't expected Khorne to go for blood. "Nonsense. Otherwise we'd both be beaten to death," Korga replied as he charged, ordering the other phantoms to get Inzar to safety. A lightning claw flared in Korga's hand, and two superhuman warriors collided. "Korga, I'll tell the Gene Father about your behavior," Khorne snarled. "Inzar Tyrus is our kin," someone shouted. Before they could take him away, Inzar watched the two warhounds fight savagely over him. Korga's willingness to risk himself for Inzar changed something in the priest's impression of him. As the phantoms dragged Inzar away, Korga withdrew his lightning claw and turned back to Khorne, only to be met by a sudden punch. Korga ducked, smirking. "I know, I just wanted to hit you." Khorne breathed hard, then pulled out a World Eater's plasma gun. Korga froze. The sky over Galaparas was a smear of ash and fire. Flames licked the surface of the world, even as its cities still burned with a strange, uncoordinated light. Inzar clutched his book of truth as the phantoms shepherded him to a waiting gunship. The welcoming party had been waiting a long time. When Korga stumbled into the ship's cabin, face streaked with dust, Inzar had too many questions. Korga ignored him and activated the gunship's holographic table. A three-dimensional map of the Galaparas Combine's central hive city spun into being, a constellation of data points and pulsing lines. Korga swept his finger over the display and then tapped the center room. "This is where the elites of this civilization reside," he said, tracing a cluster of red dots. Light from the hollow reflected on his hand like five-colored steel, and for a moment the image twisted as if by a blade. The last bright ember of this civilization had died with the setting sun. Korga intended to extract whatever last worth humans had left to offer. "The Eightfold Path, Inzar Tyrus, this is the path you uphold?" Korga asked, his crimson gaze chilling. Inzar didn't understand how Korga knew so much. "What exactly do you want?" "I noticed you from the moment you arrived among the warhounds." Korga did not answer directly. His stare was intent. "Your every move was under my watch. Let me introduce myself properly. I am Korga, captain of the Warhound's 7th Echelon, Phantom. We do interrogation and infiltration." Inzar's two hearts beat faster. No wonder he had always felt watched in the Warhounds. They had been wary of him from the start. He was grateful he hadn't committed any blasphemies out loud. The only worry was the book of truth at Korga's waist, his own words, his private insights into the Eightfold Path. He stole a glance at it. This is a good book. Korga smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now tell me how to obtain the blessings of these great beings. This is merely my interpretation of the Emperor's power, Inzar said stubbornly. The Eightfold Path is only part of the Emperor's might. I wrote about it, but the specifics. You don't need to hide your little secrets from me. Korga crossed his arms. Theseus warned in his head that Inzar was lying now. How Theseus knew, Korga didn't wonder. He trusted the voice like a second conscience. This priest was problematic, very much so. The 7th Echelon will fight alongside the Death Guard First Company. I'll show my sincerity. I rescued you from Khorne, and I can send you back. Korga's tone hardened. In war, anyone can die. You're not an exception. I want only what I want. Inzar bristled. I am an envoy of the Word-Bearers. As a Terran-born veteran of the Unification Wars, Korga had little respect for a conscripted priest. He had seen sacrifices and experiments by techno-barons and cults that had made him callous. I don't care about your faith. I want power to earn Lord Angron's favor. Korga had finally lost patience. He seized Inzar by the neck and slammed him against the ship's steel hull. Listen, I have no patience for your evasions. Cooperate, or you die. I don't care about doctrines. I care about results. Inzar gasped, face flushing, words choked by the grip. Korga let go at last and pointed his bolter at Inzar's head. Cooperate or death, your choice. The insult stung. Inzar was a respected priest, a master among the Word-Bearers, and now he was being bullied by a barbarian into submission. Resentment flashed in his eyes, gone as quickly as it came, an expression Theseus again noticed. Be careful, Theseus murmured to Korga. This scoundrel will try to harm us. Korga snorted. Harm them? What of the Death Guard? This joint operation with the Death Guard wasn't to coddle priests. It was to clear a path, and Karis Typhon was a name the Co-Lord had singled out. If Inzar and any others were truly suspicious, they would get filtered out. Inzar Tyrus, my cousin, for now. Know that right now only I can keep you alive. If you want, I can send you back to the Word-Bearers like a woman. I can provide you with a ship. He added, with a brief, ugly smile, the kind that sails the ocean. Korga did not speak aloud. Inzar Tyrus leaned closer, lowering his voice. Korga, since I have chosen to cooperate, I will help you wholeheartedly. If you truly succeed. He paused. Korga knew a demand was coming. What do you want? Korga asked. Inzar's eyes were red-rimmed and vicious. It's simple. I want Khorne dead. He spat the name like bile. I've done so much administrative work, and that bastard Khorne still wants to kill me? I will drag him before you, and then you can do whatever you want with him. Korga's face did not change. Inzar Tyrus smiled, cruel and satisfied. Very well. If you want to walk the Eightfold Path, you will need blood, skulls, a great many of them. The Primarchs stood in the Underhive command post. Mortarion was not free. He sat bound, his face still masked like a wrapped corpse. Only Angron and Sanguinius were present. As night fell, the Death Guard's poison gas had bled into the Hive City's atmosphere and merged with the dark. The room felt like a graveyard. Jel stepped forward with a reverence that bordered on panic and handed the rebreather he'd taken from Mortarion's face to Angron. Angron took it without question. How did you do that? Sanguinius asked in astonishment. How had Gel managed to remove that thing from Mortarion? It seemed impossible. Those Death's scions couldn't hold me. Gel said with pride. He had also brought 2 steaming cups and set them on the table before backing away. Angron took the chair the Warhounds had brought him and settled into shadow. Sanguinius felt a strange, familiar pressure in the room, the collective presence of other Primarchs in memory. Conrad Kurz, Mortarion, and now Angron's coarse breath. A familiar, searching gaze made the angel uneasy. Cough, cough. Want a sip, brother? Angron offered a mask generously. Sanguinius declined politely. No, thank you. Barbarous air isn't healthy. Angron shrugged. It doesn't bother me. I detoxify well. The butcher's nails in his skull still thrummed. The dual influence of Guilliman's order and Kersey's nightmarish foresight eased him somewhat. But the nail's endless murmuring was a private torment. He forced a grin. We need 8 days to purge all the Xenos from this world. He tapped a holographic map with a finger. 3 legions of warriors. I think that's too long. Sanguinius bristled at the 8-day estimate. As the angel spoke, Angron rose. We have to find the humans who've not yet been infested. Not everyone's been taken. We're here to liberate, not to become another tyrant. He looked at Sanguinius, testing him. You are different from Mortarion. Sanguinius smiled, perhaps a little too easily, and the grin unsettled Angron. Mortarion thinks liberation means destroying the oppressors, Sanguinius said quietly. He remembered what he and Horus had seen on Galaspar. Nothing but gas and corpses. Even surrendered overseers were denied mercy. The rift with Mortarion had begun there. I don't want you to become another Mortarion, Sanguinius added gently. Yet even rough Angron bore a fragile, inward sensitivity. What will you do about my legion and Mortarions? Angron's head tilted. Kurz's module whirred in the background, computing, analyzing Sanguinius's words. After a slow moment, Angron confirmed something he hadn't expected. Sanguinius, like Kurz, could see moments of the future. So what did you see? Angron asked softly, lowering his eyes to probe. Sanguinius blinked, calling the visions troublesome. Once I saw your people dragging the corpses of my scions. It was brief. Angron frowned. It seems I'm not alone in these visions, Sanguinius added. Sometimes these visions are a curse, Sanguinius admitted. Conrad's are worse. He's crazier than us. He hesitated, then added, It seems our father gave some of us this sight. You might be the clearest. Angron did not answer directly. Even if he had seen more, what would it change? I am searching for a truth, Sanguinius. What truth? Sanguinius asked, intrigued. The truth the Emperor hides. We are not fledglings in a greenhouse. I want to know who our true enemy is. Angron's expression shifted. A smile, half playful, half scholarly, crossed his face. He stepped forward and laid a hand on Sanguinius's wing. That bloodthirsty spirit, the dark yearning in your warriors' hearts, and what they suppress. Sanguinius shivered. His wings trembled. He'd never told anyone about the red thirst, that savage hunger his legion fought to hide. How would the Imperium react if it were revealed? Would Angron betray them? The future of his legion flickered in his mind. Then Angron patted his wing lightly and with irreverent bluntness asked, By the way, do you shed feathers? It was an odd, disarming question, a signal not to pry further. Sanguinius laughed softly and relaxed. Our brothers rate you highly, he said, smiling. Oh, please, not more notice, Angron said with mock modesty. I want no power. I only want to protect what's mine. Now, shouldn't you take up your role as elder brother and teach me a thing or two? They had been talking too long. Angron barked a command toward the doorway. Azkalon, gather the officers, form battle groups, and show your cousins your valor. The door opened, and officers of the Blood Angels and the Warhounds entered side by side. Gel, Angron said, eyes lingering on the butcher's nails embedded in the officer's skull. Study hard. I authorize you to command and assist the Blood Angels. Don't mess things up for me. Gel's Hypnos implant flickered faintly as he bowed. When Korga and the Wraith Squad disembarked from their Stormbird, the Death Guard had already been waiting. Captain Karis Typhon of the 8th First Company stood to greet them. As current commander and one-time comrade of death himself, Typhon's authority on Barbarus was near absolute. He was held in deep respect by the Legion's warriors. We've come to assist by order of Prince Angron, Korga announced, stepping down. Typhon watched him with cautious suspicion. The Warhounds had a reputation not unlike the Night Lords. Korga's voice was cold and almost electronic. He said nothing more and only nodded when Typhon acknowledged his presence. The Warhound's dark blue cloak fluttered. His ornaments were not trophies meant to intimidate, but signals of station. The Angel has assigned us to take the Upper Hive, Korga continued. The Blood Angels will liberate the other Hive cities on this world. Captain Typhon, what are your plans? The Death Guard will bring victory to the Imperium, Typhon said with pride. There was no elaborate plan, just grim, steady confidence. Korga barely concealed a twitch beneath his mask. They had no strategy beyond simple, grinding advance. What separated them from an auxiliary servitor? You intend to enter the Upper Hive on foot? Korga asked, incredulous. Always, Typhon replied. Korga considered the Death Guard's discipline and began to think how to support them from the shadows. The Hounds will assist you covertly, he said. As a gesture of goodwill, he produced a small work, writing by Inzar Tyrus, a word-bearer's cousin, and handed it to Typhon. The gesture was odd, but Typhon accepted it out of Legion camaraderie. After a long silence, Typhon finally asked, "What is your relationship with the Night Lords?" "They were the tutors of the Wraiths," Korga answered, bowing his head slightly. On Holy Terra, in the Imperial Palace, the Emperor sat at his desk composing a letter to Horus. As the last stroke of ink fell, he opened his eyes and looked past the stained glass toward the distant direction of Angron. Something in the warp had shifted, a bloody storm forming, a maelstrom that hindered travel in the material universe. It was both a curse and a perverse baptism, a spectacle of power and of slaughter. The Emperor frowned. He had expected interference by the ruinous powers, but not so brazen, not fashioned by the blood god himself. Or at least, that was how it seemed, a flaunting of might, a self-validating lie woven by the father of slaughter and the lord of war, requiring sacrifice and blood to give it shape. He glanced at the parchment. A blot of ink had run into the form of two wings, one chaotic, one holy, then been swallowed by a ribbon of spilled ink that coiled like a cable. The image unsettled him. The veil between worlds still held, but only barely. He had placed a gamble on the butcher's nails. The Emperor believed those instruments might resolve the crisis, for now. He had wagered on the will of his sons, on what their altered minds might achieve. He recalled, with a chill, the words spoken through the nails in their recent conversation. The memory lingered like a whisper, dangerous, inevitable, and not entirely under his control. Primarchs are like bird cages sunk beneath water, predators in a gilded trap. You do not bind them or teach them, you only glimpse a path already sown. The Emperor crumpled the paper and tossed it into the bin. Silence hung over the hive city. The 7th Echelon's warhounds moved like ghosts through the dark. The Death Guard's first company advanced with equal quiet. Where the enemy shouted and rallied, they were spread apart and cut down, dying in alleys, under sudden charges, under the boot and bolter of the green-armored veterans. The Death Guard took the elevators down into the mid-levels of the hive, where a small pocket of the Legion held a defensive perimeter. Typhon was about to order an assault when Korga's voice stopped him. "My cousin, our reinforcements are arriving." "Wait a moment." Typhon frowned. "Reinforcements? From where at this stage?" When the ornate, Baroque stone of an obelisk exploded outward, several Stormbird gunships came into view, their bellies opening like black moons. They dropped Limon Rust tanks in formation. The steel thunking onto concrete was a dull, terrible music that hit Typhon in the chest. The tanks disgorged men and equipment with the cold efficiency of a machine. For a heartbeat, Typhon imagined the warhounds as a wholly mechanized legion, a rare thing to witness. The top hatch of one Limon Rust swung open. A Nucerian in blue and white artificer power armor clambered out and called up crisply, "Lord Korga, 7th Echelon, 3rd Armored Company reporting." Korga only smiled and nodded. "How did you?" Before Typhon could finish the question, Korga answered with a line Typhon himself might have used. "The warhounds have always been this way." Korga's tone was casual, as if the arrival of an armored spear was nothing remarkable. He stepped forward amid the rumble and clank of tanks. Hypnos, Typhon's augmetic scout, preened at the efficiency. Typhon wondered whether the Death Guard were capable of such a deployment. Mortarion, from everything Typhon knew, would not parcel armor to every company. He conserved it for the hardest fights. Yet here it was, right behind them. "Let's move, Korga," Typhon said at last, forcing calm. "And who is this?" Korga asked, glancing past him. "Inzar Tyrus," said a voice. "A priest of the Word-Bearers. The volume I sent you, he wrote it." Korga's grin was ugly as he summarized the priest's tenets. "He says that to serve the Emperor, you must spill your foe's blood and wear Xeno skulls on your belt." "The Eightfold Path," Inzar Tyrus murmured. Hearing the name made Typhon's skin crawl, though he kept his face neutral. Korga clapped him on the shoulder with a familiarity that made Typhon flinch inwardly. "You'll join us, won't you, cousin?" "Of course," Typhon replied, stiff. "I knew it. You're a good sort. Maybe we'll be friends." Korga's arm stayed over Typhon's shoulders, the gesture more possession than affection. The battle resumed. The Warhound's specters, jump-pack troops, vaulted across voids, using their packs to arc between parapets and slam into alien and traitor alike atop the ruined high-rises. Dozens of them rode ahead of falling artillery, dropping like vultures on exposed heads. On the ground, the Death Guard moved in single, relentless waves. The armored company thudded behind, engines buzzing like funeral bells. Typhon felt for a moment like a spectator rather than a spearhead. Enemies on high were torn down by the specters, ground forces shredded by the tanks and supporting fire. Whenever the Death Guard sighted a foe, supporting barrages from the rear fell with uncanny punctuality, regardless of distance. They walked over broken bodies, boots testing the battlefield like a grim measuring stick, until they met a small knot of powerful alien psychers. The Xenos screamed, charging with bodies and sorcery both, a psychic winter licking at the surrounding facades. Many of Typhon's men stiffened. Mortarian's hatred of sorcery was legend among the Death Guard, and the Legion did not embrace sorcerous gifts. Typhon felt the same old dread and hesitated. He grasped his war scythe and moved with the others, but he was quicker. A faint pulse of psychic light ghosted around him, something he had learned to hide, and it sharpened his reflexes. The alien scions tried to seize control, but the attempt simply skittered off him. Typhon's pale face was nearly expressionless as he charged through the Xenos, his blade taking them down like cornstalks. Their bodies were fragile, their wails thin. In breaths that could have been a moment, Typhon severed the last head. He watched it float, dark hair skittering in a layer of power, until rough fingers caught it. Khorne was there, removing a hook and impaling the head with a casual, reverent motion. He turned it toward Inzar Tyrus. The word-bearer priest did not speak. He took the trophy and, with ritual slowness, cut runic marks into the skull's forehead. Letters only a zealot would treasure. Khorne stepped to Typhon and hung the head from Typhon's belt with theatrical pride. Then, with the same casual ownership, he traced a few cryptic sigils on Typhon's armor and exposed flesh. Typhon felt the heat of ink and the chill of meaning. Even he did not know what the symbols meant. Inzar Tyrus opened his mouth as if to correct them, but his life and safety were in the hands of these warhounds, and so he swallowed his protest. Typhon wanted to be angry at the indignity, but he was Khorne's cousin, and the scene had not cost any lives beyond those of the Xenos. The specters overhead and the tanks behind had reduced the Death Guard sacrifices. Gratitude was foul and practical in equal measure. He forced a thank you that showed none of his revulsion. Khorne felt the reluctance. He took Typhon's hand and slid across to walk shoulder to shoulder with him. "I can feel it," he said softly. "Feel what?" Typhon asked, though he suspected the answer. Khorne kept his voice low. "Your pain, your doubt." Typhon's body tightened. Hypnosis sensors noted a tiny, involuntary shudder. Khorne's next words were barely a whisper, meant only for him. "You are a sorcerer." The confession struck Typhon like a blow. All the rehearsed calm fell away for a moment, and a colder thing took its place. He felt exposed, as if a hidden hall had been flung open and light poured through. His hidden power thrummed under his skin, but the shriek of an artillery shell, boom, snapped the world back into place. Typhon looked up. Khorne was already back to killing Xenos with his bolter, as casual as a butcher at a table. Typhon's hand rose on instinct. There was a brutal, satisfying way he could have ended the one who had uncovered him right there, but he let it fall. "I am not," he said, and meant it both as denial and a pledge. Khorne shrugged. "All right, then." He didn't mock him. He merely watched Typhon, noting the blood dried on his armor where the earlier fighting had spattered him. Khorne's mouth lifted by the tiniest degree. Whether it was amusement or approval, Typhon could not tell. He intended to use Typhon, a clever, secret weapon, to scout for him, lead charges, and draw out what lay ahead. The push continued. With the Psyker Titan's ancient weapons gone, the Confederacy's remaining forces were routed. The march of the two legions smashed through the passage to the upper levels. Surrounding buildings lay in ragged ruin. The enemy's last stronghold bristled with smaller tanks and concrete emplacements. Lumberjack guns, heavy anti-construct batteries were mounted on the walls. The Confederacy soldiers held their ground with eyes that glowed an uncanny blue. At the sight of green ceramite, they opened fire in a frenzy, convinced that victory still rested with them. The Death Guard advanced deliberately. The Confederacy's first wave slammed into them and was repulsed. The defenders breathed relief that was short-lived. In the shadows they had not seen, dozens of goggles winked into life. Then the lightning claws ignited, and the slaughter began, silent as a winter grave. The first claw drove through a parasitic mortal, then a second and a third. The specters flowed into the gap, and panic, real, bone-deep fear, finally crept through the Confederacy lines. Corpses began to stack. The confined alleys became funnels of death. The specters turned that civilization into a lesson in the cost of defying the Imperium. Typhon watched it all from a short distance, breathing in the reek of cordite and burned flesh. He could feel a thread of something beneath the surface of the warhounds. Fast, efficient, the deliberate spreading of terror. It reminded him of the Night Lords, that legion of nightmares who made terror their weapon. He looked at Korga and the specters and could not quite reconcile the image. Is this the warhounds? He thought, unconvinced. Far above, orbital bombardment had swelled into a background thunder, and on the rubble-strewn streets, the two forces drove their advantage until the Confederacy's last organized resistance dissolved into scattered pockets and isolated guns. The Warhounds and the Death Guard moved on in grim tandem, each a different blade of the same purpose. In another place, in the glass and iron chamber of the Galiparas Combine Council, the mood was the opposite of martial calm. Council Elder Passalia stood and spoke to the gathered delegates with a voice that tried and failed to be steady. We must surrender. A piercing cry answered him. Madame Arno, one of the councillors, snapped back. You would call that treason. Outside the council chamber, the invaders' orbital strikes shook the spire. Hive cities that might once have sent help were themselves beset or silent. Passalia tried to make the case with the logic of the overwhelmed. The Legion has fallen, he said. Our colonies have been taken. Even if they had held, do you believe their fleet could stand against the Imperium's gunfire? Madame Arno would not yield. We can look for other. Passalia cut in. I have sent calls to neighboring hives. There is only silence in reply. The rumbles from the bombardment punctuated his words. Even their great war machines have been brought low. We have played our last card. Silence settled like dust across the chamber. Those allied to Madame Arno paled. They understood what surrender meant and feared what waited for the non-human and the hybrid in the wake of imperial victory. Even if the human element pleaded for mercy, what would become of their alien allies? How do you negotiate for species that the Imperium defines as xenos? The Council had reached a precipice. The fates of two civilizations hung on the edge. Passalia felt every step toward surrender as both betrayal and necessity. In the end, there were no more good choices, only the desperate arithmetic of survival. Surrender now, and we at least have a chance to preserve what is ours. Madame Arno's civilization and legacy can be saved. Do you want to see them break through here and annihilate everything? Passalia roared. Inside the arc-shaped council hall, the others fell silent. Those sat in front of the holographic displays, aside from Madame Arno arguing with Speaker Wu, simply waited for the final decision. What a performance! An electronic voice cut through the hall. Heads turned. Everyone listened in astonishment, not understanding how an outsider had infiltrated their comms. I am Hypnos, under my co-lord, your inquisitor. I have heard your words and recorded your demands, the voice continued. The Imperium of Man will accept your surrender. Faces, human and xeno alike, lit with hope and agitation. Hypnos, Lord Hypnos. Passalia's voice trembled. There was suddenly a real chance to preserve the Confederacy, to continue their civilization. But, Hypnos added, and the single syllable made the hope in the room shiver. We will accept only human surrender. I will send you a document. I will not accept any submission if Xenos remain among you. The Imperium of Man cannot tolerate your existence. Here is the Book of Truth. I expect, in our fashion, that you will fill this place with blood and battle. The victors will rule this world again. Whether you worship me is irrelevant. What matters is whether you survive. The choice is yours. Hypnos withdrew from the channel. Passalia breathed deeply. A data packet arrived, the eightfold path from the Book of Truth, blasphemous doctrine that ran counter to every guiding principle of their civilization. The counselors frowned. The text read like a cult's creed. But circumstances had narrowed their options. Passalia glanced toward the distant Xeno-counselors, then pressed a button. Why should we stop the attack? He demanded. On the lower platforms, Typhon tensed as he pulled his helmet down. The stale smell of rust clung to him. The smear of blood that Korga had dabbed along his pauldrons made him even more ill at ease. He didn't understand the gesture, but Korga's grin told him it was deliberate. "The leaders are preparing to surrender," Korga relayed into Typhon's ear, repeating the words Hypnos had given him. "So your warhounds would have those Xenos open the lift to welcome us?" Typhon's roar filled the lift bay. He despised the idea. "Ha ha!" Korga barked laughter back over the intercom and clapped a heavy arm around Typhon's shoulder. "They're dealing with those psyker species. You should know psykers breed on humans. That's a sin. We need names, humans who are not yet parasitized." Typhon shoved Korga away. Fury flashed in him. "Naive, those tyrants should be hanged," he spat. "Die under the Death Guard's war scythe. We don't surrender. We're here to destroy the tyranny of this world. Put away your naive hearts. You aren't fit to be space marines." His words were venomous, bordering on heresy. The ghosts watched him with anger, but Korga motioned them to silence. Typhon's fury ran deeper than a simple argument. He carried a secret, part Xeno, part human. He had to prove his loyalty to the Imperium, to bury what he was. No one had ever cared for him. Inferiority and fragility shaped him. He wrapped himself in steel. "Then be my guest," Korga said, offering a flat hand, signaling the end of cooperation. Typhon said nothing. He swung his war scythe with a heavy arc and strode away. "I will report your betrayal to our Legion Master," he shouted. "Want me to open a line to Gel or Lord Angron?" Korga retorted, baiting him. Typhon stormed off, seething. He had never met someone so treacherous. After the Death Guard's first company departed, Korga gestured to Hypnos and watched the figure lift his mask. "How are the preparations?" he asked. "I don't know whether the word-bearer's priest's writings are useful," Hypnos answered, voice flat behind the mask. "But we have prepared everything we need. I doubt the warp demons the co-lord mentioned. He also said the physical universe's veil is strong and demons cannot cross into this place." "Korga," Hypnos went on, "we only need proof. Scenes of that word-bearer's priest's blasphemy and Typhon's use of heretical sorcery." Korga's intuition, honed to a razor edge, still prickled with unease. A malevolence seemed to be coiling around the world. He hoped it was nothing more than his nerves. The elevator hummed. Typhon stood at the front, expression impassive, flanked by his Death Guard. When the doors slid open, a panorama of death unrolled before them. Corpses scattered, spent shell casings littering the floor, and blasphemous symbols scrawled across walls and banners, scriptures Typhon recognized all too well. The upper hive was silent. There were no cries, no scramble, only Death Guard breathing and the soft crunch of power boots over bodies. The Confederacy had torn itself apart. Humans and Xenos had battled in a brutal internecine collapse. Every body they passed lay headless. The skulls had been removed with surgical precision, the cuts impossibly clean. Typhon led his men forward through the dead wards and halls where the tyrants once ruled. Traces of psychic discharge hung heavy in the air. At some points, it looked as if the Xenos had been caught unprepared and slaughtered by human defenders. Elsewhere, the Xenos had fought back with forces Typhon could not wholly explain. A strange scent lingered on the air. For a moment, a restlessness flickered in Typhon, a hunger to cut, to finish. He did not know where that urge came from. A faint rustle came from the floor. Typhon raised his scythe. A small Xeno, no larger than an infant, suddenly broke cover. One of the Death Guard brought his boot down to crush it, but the expected thud never came. The Marine was lifted bodily off the ground, psychic strength. "Open fire!" Typhon roared, rustling multiplied into a crawling sea. Countless tiny Xenos streamed from cracks and vents. A Death Guard was yanked into shadow, ceramite shattering, screams, then silence. The squad locked back to back, bodies forming a shield. Their scythes tore through the attackers, but the children of that species seemed endless. Moments later, the Death Guard, who had been dragged, vanished, and then reappeared, convulsing. A tiny Xeno had burrowed into his skull, trying to puppeteer him. With a scream of pain, the Marine tore the creature free and collapsed. Even the toughest of them could not withstand such invasion. They fought on, relentless, wordless. "For Mortarion," came the shout, even as Typhon's mouth echoed with something else. "For the Imperium. For the Emperor." The names, icons, were tools. Typhon's own contempt for the Emperor bubbled under the surface. In his mind, the Emperor was merely another tyrant, perhaps a greater one, but still a tyrant. They pushed forward toward the hive's tallest spire. Bolters barked, the smell of burning and cordite all around. Death Guard used chemical agents. Typhon's scythe swung in a wide, merciless arc. The tide turned. The Xenos thinned. Victory seemed theirs. "This is the Death Guard's victory, not yours, Typhon." A faint voice threaded through his head. He ignored it. Typhon kicked open a great door. A wave of death rolled out. The interior had been turned into a field of sacrificial displays, piles of skulls, blood everywhere, but no bodies remained. Only shattered heads, carefully separated from torsos. Typhon unclipped a head from the waist of a fallen figure and flung it to the floor. The scene told him this place had become an altar. A thought, clear and cold, whispered in his mind, "What a pity." He stifled it and pushed into the council chamber. The room was drenched in blood. In the center, a handful of humans crouched, drawing strange glyphs with fresh blood, eyes bright with madness. "Lord, great Lord!" Pasalia shrieked when he saw Typhon's company enter. He pointed proudly to the runes, eyes wild. "The gods are watching. He saw it. He saw it. They are coming." Typhon saw a man no different from the Xenos beyond the doors, perhaps more ridiculous. He drew a vortex grenade from his belt, a device that could tear a hole in the warp for a fleeting instant. The whisper in his head urged, "Yes, just like that. Blow him up." Typhon listened. He hurled the grenade. Pasalia caught it in his blood-smeared hands and smiled through clenched teeth. The warp folded open. Pasalia was torn apart by jagged rifts of crimson energy. "That will do," Typhon said into the comms. "The Death Guard have completed the mission. Without the Warhounds, they could still accomplish their objectives." The tyrant had been eliminated. Typhon turned to lead his squad out, but the warp rift did not close. Ribbons of red light shot up from the torn aperture, a pillar of scarlet power stabbing into the sky. A roar, vast and terrible, rolled out from the breach. "Report this to Lord Angron immediately. We have a problem," came the sharp voice over the channel. Far above, Angron and Sanguinius both felt it through the narrow opening of their communications. The world had been wrapped in a dense, unnatural malevolence. The two demigods of the Imperium felt the hair on their arms lift. For a moment, the universe itself seemed unreal. Then the lines went dead. "Third battle group has lost contact," as Keelan barked. "First and second battle groups have also lost contact," another voice reported. Bad news kept coming from the officers. Angron slammed a fist against his war axe. Brows knitted. The butcher's nails were oddly quiet, and he felt like a headless fly. "Help me get Gel on the net." He pinned his hopes on Gel and Korga. Perhaps they could restore comms. "Lord Angron, we can't even reach the ships in orbit," one officer reported. Then a patched channel opened directly through the static. Archon Gel of the Warhounds. Khorne, watching the council with contempt, cranked the volume and acknowledged the call. "Regent Gel, Khorne acknowledges." There was a beat of silence on the line. Then a voice barked the password. "For the co-lord." Khorne returned it. "Tell Lord Angron Korga has failed. I'll take my guard and try to reach Korga and the Death Guard. We don't know what's happened, so be careful." "Tell Gel. Tell him to come down and pick us up," Angron ordered. Only Gel still had a relay, and Angron would not let his scions be left to die. When Khorne relayed the command, Gel agreed at once. Even he had not realized how urgent things were. "I have a bad feeling," came the terse reply. Angron leaned against the bulkhead and watched Sanguinius carefully. The angel's face carried a sober edge. Blood and rot hung on the air like a promise, Sanguinius's wings folding in, visions flickering at the corner of his mind. The angel ignored them. He would not die today. Angron felt that same resolve and a strange, reluctant kinship with the Primarch he had once opposed. The nails began to thrum. Even as the system AI worked to patch comms, the safeguards Angron had left ticked on. Both demigods felt the same dread. At the heart of this storm, something unspeakable was trying to claw through the veil into the real world. If it broke through, it would be catastrophic. They both understood the mandate. It had to be stopped. When the command room hatch cycled open, Angron rose. Gel and another Primarch stood in the doorway. Mortarion, wrapped in bandages like an ancient mummy, his face drawn and grim. Behind Gel, the pale chief librarian Varys trailed. Whatever had passed between Warhounds and Death Guard had left its mark. Mortarion entered with Tassus of the 7th Company at his side. Angron stepped forward to inspect his brother's wounds. The injuries from confronting the Psyker Titan had not healed. "You should rest," he said. "Rest?" Mortarion snapped. "Angron, the reports show my scions are missing. How do you expect me to rest?" Sanguinius moved between them. "Mortarion, this is no time for quarreling. We need to find out what's happening." Mortarion's contempt spat back. "Sanguinius, your benevolence won't save us. Your nobility is useless in war." The Blood Angels bristled at the insult. Angron clenched his axe until it hummed. He stepped closer to Mortarion, forcing the other Primarch to meet his eyes. "Do you think only your scions are missing?" he asked. "They fought alongside the Death Guard. My men shed blood to save you. They died with honor. Those missing men fought for your glory as well as mine." "You can curse me," Angron said coldly, "but why insult their sacrifice? Whether Blood Angels or Death Guard, weren't they all fighting for the Imperium? We fought together. Is their sacrifice not a sacrifice? Or does only the loss of your scions matter? Tell me that, Mortarion." Angron stepped past Sanguinius, turned his back slightly, and opened the bandages to show the wound he had taken from the Psyker Titan. Sadness flashed across his features in a way Mortarion had rarely seen. The Death Lord's fury faltered. "I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean what?" Angron cut him off. "I worried about you, brother. Now I see that worry was unnecessary. Perhaps the Blood Angels and Warhounds are not seen by you as living men. Perhaps you only see your own scions." Then Angron barked an order. "Jell, muster all Warhounds. We go now and find out what the hell happened. I will give my life to bring back your scions." He turned and strode from the command room. The hatch sealed. Mortarion realized, too late, that he had offended the Primarch who had once saved his life. He opened his mouth to call after Angron, but Sanguinius watched the blue and white Stormbird lift off, unhesitating. "He's gone," Sanguinius said softly. Mortarion made to follow. With no other choice, Sanguinius handed command to his Kalon and marshaled the Blood Guard to board the Stormbird. As they rose, a report came through. Korga and his men had mishandled the mission. He was attempting to reach the upper hive to rescue Typhon. Worse, in another hive city, they had encountered creatures that were not of the material world. "Daemons," Angron growled. He stared at the central hive in the distance, feeling the nails buzz. "Order the Warhounds to stand ready. We're going into trouble." He closed his eyes, bracing himself. Volume 1, Chapter 174. Chapter 166, Another One Gone Mad. Yuzurak had been born of weakness and despair. Like her origin, the creature the material universe called a warp demon had been spawned from the self-destructive ruin of a single world, the bitter last emotions of its sole survivor. That world lay dead in the old night. Yuzurak was not grand. She was small and fragile, dragged across the immaterium by a greater power. The barrier between realms here was strong, and Yuzurak's own weakness made her easy to hide and, perversely, able to slip through the warp without being torn apart. She should have been nothing more than a child of that lost world, but palace intrigue and betrayal had made refuge impossible. She turned instead to the Blood God's realm. No greater power there cared for a whisper like her, and in that neglect she found shelter. Yuzurak had learned to protect herself by living in the hearts of the weak. Now she nested inside Typhon, licking at the raw edges of his mind with a tongue of lies and malice, seeding doubts until they festered. The Death Guard Psyker and his squad struggled to close a warp rift while horrors poured through. This was no thing mortal hands could simply seal. The chamber itself seemed sanctified by the Blood God, a perverse blessing that the Death Guard did not understand. Yuzurak delighted in feasting on Typhon's insecurity. She discovered, with greedy curiosity, that the Imperial superhuman harbored rebellious fantasies about the Imperium and even about Mortarion. That was exquisite. She breathed temptation into him like air. Around them, lesser demons swarmed, attempting crude invasions of weak souls. Yuzurak watched as one of her companions burrowed easily into a Death Guard's mind, a feast in miniature. Most of these allied creatures were blunt instruments. Instead of subtle seduction, they forced change, injecting vile power into flesh until ceramite split and malformed muscle erupted. One such Death Guard began to twist and mutate, flesh tearing through armor. The apothecary rushed forward, but pain and frenzy took the mutant. He raised his scythe and swung toward his brothers. Typhon flung psychic energy between his palms and restrained the frenzied brother. He felt the demonic presence grazing the edge of a soldier's soul, and for a moment he thought they had the upper hand. Yuzurak murmured in triumph. "You've been exposed, Typhon," she hissed, tasting the hope of conquest. The lesser daemons, however, had no talent for subtlety. They relied on force. They could infest bodies and twist them into something monstrous, but they lacked the patience to whisper doubts, and so the first wave of degeneration ended in carnage. The Death Guard withdrew from the assembly hall and pushed out into the open air, only to be met not by reinforcements, but by a tide of risen corpses stumbling forward. Bolters rattled and war scythes swung. Typhon stopped caring how his comrades looked at him. He unleashed a sweeping psychic blast and threw the corpses aside. Yuzurak chewed on a new seed of temptation. "Think how Mortarion will look at you," she purred. "A psyker. He will burn you alive. Kill the ones who know your secret." Step by step, she planted the doubts that would grow into treason. Even if Typhon did not answer out loud, the suggestion had been grafted into him. Yuzurak already dreamed of consuming the warm, delicious soul she was making. Korga's ghost squads cleared the dead with brutal efficiency. "This is your eightfold path," he barked, watching the reanimated corpses go down under bolts and blades. He split a mortal corpse into 8 pieces and felt the cold thrill at his core. The battlefield's brutality vibrated through him like hunger. A voice threaded through that hunger. "Kill him. This is the word-bearer's fault. Kill them all." Korga snarled inward. "What the hell? What is this? A daemon? The co-lord was right. Get out of my head. What are you then? Are you a daemon too? I am your father." Theseus, running system diagnostics, felt a foreign presence lodge inside Korga's mind. He hunted through the shipboard utilities for the antivirus the system AI had installed, a kind of emotional firewall. He activated it. Heat stung the top of Korga's skull. He could not tell if Theseus was purging a parasite or trying to kill him, but the voice in his head vanished. Hypnos, the ship's sentient interface, pushed a message through. Lord Angron and Archon Gel were leading the warhounds to pick them up. Comms were obscured, but the co-lord's network was still operational. New mission: Korga, find the Death Guard and bring them back. And also, what else? Korga snapped. Punch that idiot in the face. Korga turned. Inzar Tyrus stood staring at a fallen banner, mouthing prayers that meant nothing now. "This is impossible," the word-bearer muttered to himself. "This isn't the Eightfold Path. It's a lie. I believed a lie. This can't be happening." Faith, the thin thread holding him, snapped. Korga closed the distance in a motion that was more animal than man and sent a fist into Inzar's face. Teeth flew. Blood arced. Korga towered over the stunned word-bearer. "Tell me how to deal with these things," he demanded. Inzar Tyrus stared up at him, despair hollowing his eyes. "This is the damn thing you worship." Korga wanted to shoot Inzar Tyrus where he stood. He did it, fired and struck the man in the arm. A cockpit HUD pinged. Death Guard signal detected. "Take me to them," the wounded man screamed. Korga only hoped Typhon wasn't already lost. If he was, then whatever plan they had, if it had ever been more than a hope, was ruined. Night fell strange and wrong. The stars winked out, the horizon blurred, communications cut, and a thick, unnatural fog leaked across the wasteland. For the defenders, ignorance was both solace and peril. Korga drove the ghost squads forward. Every warhound felt the demon's whispers clawing at their heads. Weak things, yet born of the warp and given terrible strength in the material world. "Guard your minds, for the co-lord and Angron," Korga barked across the comms. Theseus worked like a man possessed, hunting and cutting down the lesser things. On the invisible battlefield, the demons, born of raw emotion and suffering, battered at Korga's mind. Theseus couldn't gauge everyone's situation and tried to call for reinforcements. Hypnos answered by way of the co-lord's network. "Hold on, brother. I'm contacting the Ultramarines in the secret realm. Maybe they have a solution." Korga felt another pressure on his thoughts, petty, probing voices. The first time he'd pushed at those scraps with red data, they had screamed. The demons shed little emotional shards that could be harvested as energy. Theseus was turning that fury into something usable. "Bear with it," Theseus urged. "Get angry. Imagine His Highness Angron betraying the Imperium." Korga almost laughed. It wasn't easy to make him angry. He already was. Still, the artificial prompt worked. A stream of rage flowed through him. Theseus continued to siphon and refine it into red data. "Can you be a little more miserable?" The ghost muttered. "You can't make me both angry and miserable." Korga snapped. If that was Theseus's intent, it felt like pity. The warhounds around him steadied. Their panic eased while he felt his own head grow unbearably hot. That calm among the troops was good, but the price was his own equilibrium. "Theseus, what did you do?" he croaked. "I turned your anger into data synapses and cut at the invisible things like a saw," the voice replied. "I can only do so much." They squealed and scattered like mice. Korga wanted a cooling unit or any kind of reprieve. Corpses began to crawl from the ground, a plague of movement that meant nothing to the ghosts' bodies but gnawed at their minds. The invisible assailants kept pressing at the warhounds' defenses. With Theseus's help, a data shield rose around Korga, an iron coffin that drove the demons back. Ahead, Korga could see the Confederacy's council hall, and beyond it, the Death Guard. This was a clash of minds now. Chiwu Surlak felt the warp rift tearing wider. The physical world tried to close it, and the supreme power only ripped the wound further. Her own power swelled. Given time, she could corrupt this place outright. Lasers of raw warp energy danced like flame. Some invisible, vast hand toyed and stroked, and the gods watched. The blood god fixed his gaze upon two demigods of the Imperium. The other, he considered, was already his claim. Clouds churned into crimson skulls and twisted into mocking faces before dissolving as cold rain began to fall with thunder. Typhon! Rain ran down Korga's goggles as he saw the warhounds racing at the Death Guard line. In his head came a whisper, insistent and corrosive. "They will know your secret. Kill them. Use the psychic power you are most proud of. That is not witchcraft. It is power. A god is watching you. He will be the master you must serve, not the emperor." Cold water kissed the faceplate. Korga halted. He looked at the Death Guard, flesh mutating beneath their masks, and saw in Typhon's expression behind his helm, shock. A diagnostic tone chimed in his ear. "There is more inside their bodies." "What's wrong?" someone called. "Stay back," Korga ordered. Typhon raised his war scythe and watched Korga warily. Korga ignored the caution and stepped close. The scythe's blade scraped his ceramite, leaving a shallow cut. "I'll get you out of here," Korga said. Typhon's surprise was plain. No argument, no lecture, only a movement to answer when a possessed Death Guard erupted. He seized a comrade and crushed his skull between his hands. Then the war scythe spun behind Typhon in a murderous arc. Korga reacted instantly, thrusting his lightning claw to block the blow. The possessed Death Guard laughed, a sound like rusted chains, and his muscle tore through armor. Bullets and blades found him almost at once, riddling him with holes. Korga pushed. "Come with me." Typhon answered, voice rough. They tried to fall back, to slip free, but the place had become a maze. Some power trapped them, baiting them apart. Typhon didn't know the enemy's goal. Neither did Korga. Frustration boiled over. "Theseus, find an exit." "I can't," Theseus admitted. "Maintaining the shield is already a strain. There are too many of them, everywhere." When thunder rolled again, Korga closed his eyes. If escape was barred, they'd have to fight through. "Can you still fight?" he asked. "Of course," Typhon said. "We are Death Guard." Korga leaned in close to the chief librarian's ear. "Use your psychic power, then. The warhounds will keep your secret. If you won't, join us." They had no time for argument. The war came swift and ugly. Far above, the Stormbird cleaved through cloud. Gel fed situation reports to Angron while Varys worked nearby, his frost-wrought gift dulling the butcher's nails that burned and screamed in Gel's skull. For the three legions, all communications flowed through him. The warhounds still held, but the Blood Angels were fraying. Some squads had already snapped under a strange compulsion. Command fell entirely to Angron. He ordered all units to their assembly points, no time to allow the demons purchase. Then the gunship shuddered. Something had struck them. "Enemy attack," someone shouted. Sulfur stung Angron's throat. Red shapes moved in the air, winged things with white bone frames showing through bloody membranes, three-taloned claws, and furred necks like snarling bats. From a hive city, a crimson pillar stabbed through the clouds. Angron ordered weapons hot. The Stormbird and its escort opened up. Lasers, shells, and everything they had shredded the attackers into fluttering gore, but the creatures kept coming, numbers endless. Blood leached down with the rain. Where did these things come from? A pilot whooped in horror. Then a voice filled the world. Not sound so much as an irresistible psychic command. Recite my name. Angron felt the voice hammer his scions' minds. Anyone with iron resolve, mortals caught in its sweep included, could resist, but the blow landed. Father! Some cried out uncontrollably. Gel looked at Angron and saw light erupt from the Primarch's head, a golden beam that the pilot recognized with a chill. He had felt that radiance once before, in the rare, impossible audience with the Emperor. The beam arced from Angron's crown into the storm clouds and vanished into some other space. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Then the warp surged. A violent tide of emotion flooded thought and bone, a conventional, burning need to fight. Warp concentration over Galaparis spiked. An oppressive, incendiary aura swept through minds and filled men and Xenos with bloodlust. Engines screamed as the Stormbird took a hit. 2 engines shredded, the craft nosing downwards like a wounded beast. Brace for impact, Angron roared. On the Imperial Palace walls, the Emperor stood, watching. He felt the Butcher's nails trigger a contingency he'd intended for their specific mischief. Not this. Something had gone off script. Worry gnawed at him even though he trusted System AI. Doubts and unknowns gathered. Which legions were closest? Iron Warriors, Iron Hands, Ultramarines. He weighed the risk and then made a decision. If System AI could hold, if the gamble went right, the god's attention would fix on Angron and the Nail. That shift could favor the Webway project. The cost might be high, possibly 2 Primarchs, but a temporary sacrifice for humanity might be worth it. He clenched his fist and gambled. Down on the ground, the fog swirled. Angron climbed from the crippled cockpit, the war cry still gripped in his gauntleted hand. Not a single warhound had been lost. Some mortals lived who had been spared by death, while others lay welded to their armor, crushed to pulp. Gel forced himself out of the smoking cockpit, dazed. Varys supported him, using his mind-saving power to keep the Butcher's nails from frying the pilot's brain. Above and below, the world reeled. The fight was only beginning. 111. Section 111. We were in the midsection of the central hive city. A Nuceria Solar Auxiliary's outpost lay about 15 kilometers away. Gel fed the surrounding sensor data to the Redeemer Guard. Khorne led the others, eyes sweeping through the mist as fragmented sounds drifted toward them. A group of enemies is approaching, someone reported. Hypnos's radar confirmed the arrival of hordes of corpses. How are the forces in the other hive cities? Angron asked. Gel answered crisply. They've been attacked by unknown creatures. Contact Captain Lothara Salen. Angron's demigod mind raced. In the absence of the Butcher's nails, he had pushed every system to its limits. Under whatever strange influence had cut communications, the space fleet and ground units had lost contact. Gel had become his eyes and ears. Angron specified orbital bombardment targets, and Gel relayed the command to Lothara Salen via Hypnos. When the ground began to tremble, Angron knew his plan had worked, and the fleet opened up in orbital bombardment. Their mission was simple: bring the ships to position and drop the ordnance to relieve pressure on the ground forces. Enemy attack! Khorne barked as figures shuffled out of the fog. The dead bodies advanced in fits and starts. The Redeemer Guard opened fire from gunboats and from the ruined buildings that dotted the streets. The roar of bolters filled the mist. Librarians, guard our brothers' minds, Varys shouted, sensing the psychic taint hidden in the gloom. The librarians extended their vigilance, scanning minds as the guard held the line. Advance to the camp, Angron ordered, hauling a Land Raider Crusader, airlifted by a Stormbird, out from the ruins. The vehicle would save them time. Amid the chaos, he caught sight of a red figure streaking through the mist, unnaturally fast. Angron noted it at once. Varys, get Gel into the Land Raider Crusader. Khorne, cover Gel. He is our eyes and ears. Order the fleet to bombard our surroundings. Angron roared. Whatever that thing was, he refused to believe a 40-meter shell wouldn't finish it. P.S. Second update. Please vote, Godfathers. Where are my votes? Volume 1, Chapter 177, 169th Chapter. I spit an old loogie at you. Mist wrapped everything, visibility reduced to a few meters. Strange, eerie roars echoed from the haze. As commander of the Nuceria Solar Auxiliary's 7th Echelon Armored Division, Tyne ordered his men to set up defenses at once. They had 13 Lemon Rust battle tanks and 4 chimeras, one chimera serving as command. Over 100 soldiers were deployed around them. Tyne watched rain streak down the armored hull and listened to the grim reports. Regent Gel had warned them. This was a new enemy, neither Xenos nor familiar human foe, something they had never faced. When communications first cut out, panic rippled through the ranks, and strange noises made men jittery. After re-establishing contact with Regent Gel, the Nuceria soldiers steadied themselves and repelled several waves of attackers. Flesh and blood corpses were shredded by steel and shell, yet their ammunition supplies were critically low. "We have reserve ammo for 3 more waves," Tyne told his subordinates. "Conserve rounds and pick up other weapons where you can." He stayed on the line with Regent Gel. New orders came through, and after confirming the cipher, Tyne learned that the Legion Master and his force were 15 kilometers away. If they could hold for 10 more minutes, the pressure on their position would ease. "Open fire! Open fire! What is that thing?" "Number 3, to your left." Gunfire and shells tore into the rain. Tyne moved to a firing position and stepped out into the downpour. He saw a creature straight out of Nightmare, entirely red, horned, cloven hooves clamping down on wreckage, a cold greatsword that sliced through a lemon rust like paper. For any ordinary man, the sight would have been mind-shattering, but these were the Nuceria Solar Auxiliaries, veterans who had stood against the Silver Vines. Tyne drew his chainsword and charged. He saw one of his warriors bisected by the creature's blade, 2 tanks and a transport lost in an instant, a dozen men cut down. Fury lit Tyne's chest. The men counterattacked. The monster leapt to a ruined building and began to toy with the position, twirling its greatsword as if it had found a novel plaything. Tyne fired his bolt pistol to force it down. It obeyed, landing on the ground, and Tyne met it blade to blade. The impact knocked the breath from him. The creature was taller than he was, and ugly to behold. In disgust, Tyne spat, "Tooey," a mouthful of old phlegm onto its face. Surprise flickered across its features, then fury. The demon lashed out. Tyne's hand, the webbing between thumb and forefinger, was split open by the force of the blow. He dodged and rose, cursing the Xeno as the creature charged again. Then, at Tyne's signal, a lemon rust brought its main gun to bear. The creature tried to twist aside, but the shell detonated through it. Tyne watched the ruined thing slump to the ground, utterly dead. "Tell His Highness Angron, we were attacked by unknown Kriya," Tyne began, but he didn't finish. A whistling came through the rain, and something struck him. Instinct made him lash out with his chainsword, but he was flung against the tank's steel. Pain exploded in his ribs, at least 5 were broken, and a lung spasmed with every breath. He fell to his knees. "Xeno! Despicable!" he rasped as the red thing approached, greatsword raised. A medic barreled forward and stemmed the bleeding. Tyne saw an anesthetic dart embedded in the creature's back, one of Nuceria's own. The medic worked quickly. "Go help the others," Tyne said weakly. The medic cut Tyne's master-crafted power armor open and saw exposed bone. "I'm out of anesthetic," he said. Tyne nodded, gritting his teeth as the medic set broken ribs and probed, his bones screaming under the hands. Sweat ran down Tyne's face. A shadow fell over them both, and Tyne looked up. A grin split the creature's face. Then those jaws were closed upon by a pair of massive hands. It was the Legion Master in person, Angron. He flung the demon aside like a rag, its death absolute. The god of war's roar cut through the rain. Demons a dozen soldiers could scarcely kill were nothing to him. Angron cut them down with terrifying ease. Blood splashed his armor and washed away in the deluge. Khorne led the Redeemer Guard in a coordinated charge. Bolters thundered and turned demon flesh into sieves. One creature made a play for Khorne. He raised his chain axe and cleaved it from skull to groin, kicked the corpse away and kept moving. "For the Legion Co-Lord," he bellowed. After dispatching several foes, he returned to Angron's side. "Galen," Angron called, nodding toward the apothecary. Chief Apothecary Galen approached with a tight expression, examining a fallen demon on the ground. "A lesser specimen," he said, unconcerned. "P.S. Third update. Please vote, please vote, please vote. Volume 1, Chapter 178, Diarrhea. It hurts so much. Author's note. I wrote 3 chapters ahead. I'm feeling unwell and need to rest my stomach. I'll be offline for a bit." Volume 1, Chapter 179, 170th Chapter. I am proud of you. Tanks rumbled forward. Angron stood before a lemon russ, rain hammering his armor, and the distant wails of mortals carried on the wind. He was pleased, quietly, brutally pleased, at the steady morale of his new recruits. They had seen little battle, yet they held. "We haven't received any reports from that outpost," Gel said over the comms. Bad news. After 10 more minutes, the force reached the outpost. Angron smelled scorched ammo residue and moved forward. Khorne stayed close. Inside the outpost, a stench hit Angron, a smell he knew too well and which kindled fury. A ghost echelon trooper was embedded halfway into a wall. Blue power armor bloomed with dark spores and pus ran from half his face. Angron's chest tightened with grief. He stepped forward, throat raw, but Khorne restrained him. "Khorne." "Forgive me, sire," Khorne said, eyes hard. He would not allow his Primarch to be exposed to whatever corrupted the man within the wall. The ghost began to mutter, eyes milky, but he still gripped his power axe. "Xeno," he croaked. Angron calmed his mind and reached out, putting a measure of peace into the man. The ghost's voice trembled, uncertain whether what he saw was real. "Father," he said, "Eulistus." Angron's tone was full of sorrow. The nails could no longer anchor the man's soul. The Primarch could only watch his scions fall to corruption. Apothecary Gollin shook his head. "He's too far gone, Your Highness. His spirit," he began. Angron raised a hand to silence him. He turned to the trooper and forced an easy expression. "Report, soldier." "Warhound's 7th Echelon, Ghost Squad Lieutenant Eulistus reporting to His Highness Angron. We were garrisoned here when we were struck by an unknown attack. Nuceria soldiers contracted some kind of plague. They died gloriously," Eulistus added, voice breaking. "Then waves of the dead attacked. We repelled them. Centurion Korga is supporting Typhon of the Death Guard and the others. Then we were assaulted by unknown psyker entities and strange creatures trying to break our minds. And finally the Red Xenos. We killed them." Angron listened, every line of his face carved with war and sorrow, weighing each fragment of report, already planning the next move. "Finally, our brothers suffered flesh mutations. A few have died, and the rest fled to seek aid. Eulistus's report is complete." Eulistus had returned to the Redemption's war room. He poured out everything he knew in a single breath and fell silent, awaiting judgment. "Eulistus, you and your squad did a fine job," Angron said. A bitter laugh escaped him. "Anything more to add?" Angron clenched the war cry in his hand. Those around him felt the thunder in their father's heart. The warhounds gathered, silent, watching a brother whose fate was already sealed. "It is my honor to swear fealty to you," Eulistus whispered. "Did I disgrace myself?" he asked softly. "No." Angron's voice rang out, a hard smile on his lips. "Eulistus, you served with honor. I am proud to have sons like you." "Khorne, put a shot in my head." Eulistus's plea was low, steady. He wanted the mercy of a clean end rather than risk contagion. Khorne's reply was a single, impassive motion. He raised his bolter. "Glory to the co-lord," came the shouted affirmation. "For the Imperium." Eulistus roared his loyalty one last time. Bolter shells cracked. Khorne closed his eyes. He could feel the weight of their father's heart in that moment. When the report ended, only silence remained. "Find those bastards," Angron seethed, eyes bloodshot beneath his helm. "No quarter. Chop them to pieces." He shook with fury as he looked at Eulistus's corpse. "An entire battle group is coming to support us," he said, voice low, "and many warriors are succumbing to the red thirst." On the Stormbird, as Galen spoke quietly to Sanguinius, the angel seemed distant, dazed. He had just been assailed by murmurs, seductive voices threading through his mind. "Can Mortarion still be contacted?" he asked. Angron had not heard from Mortarion since Sanguinius boarded his craft, and the silence gnawed at him. Mortarion's situation was far grimmer than the Warhound's. He had been struck by demons and hurled down into the lower hive. The fighter had crashed, the Death Lord's body battered. "Comms are damaged," Mortarion said as a death shroud took his flank. He planted his scythe before him and stared up at the towering silhouette of Hive City. They were isolated. The interlaced rain brought back memories. Barbarous, the mountain, his adoptive father. A strange certainty scraped at him, as if the very air carried the scent of that cursed world. He strapped on his mask, counted under his breath, then frowned. The numbers slid over and over in his skull until every sum resolved to sevens, 777, a rolling omen, neither wholly good nor wholly ill. "Advance," Mortarion ordered. The death shrouds moved without sound. Rain filled the air, and with it came voices, not words, but a chorus. Plus he has come. They have come. This time we will not fail. We will add to the family. So. Mist coalesced around Mortarion and his retinue, forming for a moment the grinning, bloated face of something before it dissolved back into the fog. Thunder fell from the sky. Whether illusion or reality, the mist thickened over the battlefield. Alien corpses lay in increasing numbers as the warhounds approached the elevator that led upward. The steel was crusted in rust. "This place has been corroded, my lord," Varys reported, kneeling to inspect the pitted metal. The decay looked ancient, but psychic residue told him it had been wrought in an instant. Some blasphemous power had defiled the structure. The elevator groaned as it descended. Varys was the first to step aboard and sweep its interior. When he nodded, Angron readied to go up. "Varys, you and Gel stay here," he ordered. "Khorne, you come with me." Gel could not leave Varys. The librarian's presence kept his internecine urges from tearing him apart. Varys inclined his head and sent other librarians with Angron. "Gel," Angron added as the elevator doors slid shut, "command and communications are entrusted to you." The lift rose. 70 muttered, fingers trembling as he recited some cadence to steady himself. The demons came in waves. His lightning claw had been snapped. His axe's swing was a ragged bark. Ammunition was nearly gone. The ghost squad had walked into an ambush. Where the creatures had come from, Kufas could not tell. They were everywhere across the ruins of the hive, on the ridges, in the alleys, pouring down like a living tide. Death hung at his throat. The transhuman logic in his mind knew the odds. He'd die this day or in the next. He leapt into the thick of it anyway, swinging his axe with the last of his strength. Around him, brothers bled out. 2, maybe 4, remained at his side. He did not have the luxury to count grief. A spear stabbed through ceramite into meat. Pain flared. Kufas slammed his head into a red-skinned thing until it went limp, then whipped out his bolt pistol and fired. For a beat, the blue armor at his chest was smeared in blood, and he could not tell whose it was. From among the throng, a larger figure loomed, muscle and chain, a gargantuan axe in its hands. It laughed, helmet discarded, its voice a guttural mockery. "Warrior," it barked, "call me daddy." Kufas planted his feet with 2 brothers still clinging to life near him. The demonic herald strode forward, spreading its promise. "Join us, and our lord will grant you supreme power." Kufas raised his battle axe in refusal. Anger swelled through him like a weapon. The herald lifted a greatsword and charged, the blade a red smear cutting toward Kufas. He felt his face go pale from blood loss. Breath came ragged, movement slow, but his head stayed clear. He had fought countless times. This was simply another slash upon the same fate. Then a voice cut through the maelstrom. "Khorne!" Bolter fire erupted from all directions. Squads of 3 redemption guards drove into the crowd and began to clear swarms of daemons, but the monsters fell like locusts, too many to count. Bright as falling lightning, a weapon descended from the sky, Margot's Fang of the Hounds. It slammed into the battlefield and burst into a cascade of pyrotechnic death. Wherever it detonated, daemons unmade themselves and collapsed back into the warp. The herald stared at the smoking crater the weapon had carved from the upper hive down to the mid-hive. Under the blood god, he had never seen such raw, uncompromising destruction. For a first time, he understood the devotion the blood god felt for Angron. Angron's war cry rose, and in one clean stroke, he severed the herald's head. The daemon flared into red starlight and was gone. "Gullen," Angron called. The apothecary moved forward and dropped to his knees beside Kufas. He checked the wounds with a practiced hand. "He can be saved. My lord, leave this place." Kufas's reply was a whisper. Angron barely had time to take in the scene when a pale blue light glimmered from the pit torn open by Margot's fang. Around it, reality seemed to stitch itself back together. The torn carcasses reassembled for a breath, sounds rewound. The strands of the ambush twined into a single insidious pattern. Angron's eyes narrowed. This had been no random slaughter. This had been a trap, and it had been laid for him. He reached for a comm. "Gel," he tried, but static roared through the channel. His last transmission to the librarian dropped away into nothing. The warp thickened like a wet cloth over the world. Angron felt something cold and small in his skull, the temperature of a nail driven into bone. It burned like a human fever. Warhounds, he barked, the word a blade in the gloom. Angron raised the axe in his hand. Save your brothers. Fearless. The warriors, Khorne among them, roared and surged forward, ready to tear their enemies apart. For a moment, Khorne's eyes caught something strange, the distant silhouette of a blood angel that appeared and vanished as if it had never been there. An illusion, maybe. He frowned and pushed the thought away. Sanguinius stood on the blasted expanse of the upper hive. He should have been following Mortarion and Angron, but he had arrived here first. A stormbird settled on the ruined plateaus and several companies disembarked. We've lost communication, came the report. Ascalon glanced at Sanguinius and saw him frown. The angel's face tightened as visions, omens, illusions flashed before his eyes. Sanguinius shook his head as if to clear them. Omens could be lies, and dreams were treacherous. The only thing left to do was to press forward, to face whatever prophecies the abyss might throw at him. Can't contact the Warhounds? Someone asked. Sanguinius felt the situation closing in like a conspiracy. Then a mortal scribe drew his attention, a thin man named Eldon. Eldon looked at the angel, not with gawking wonder at the wings, but with a steady, reverent gaze. He sketched Sanguinius's broad silhouette, his red armor, his stern face with quick, precise strokes. You shouldn't be here, Eldon. Sanguinius walked over. My lord, this is my destiny, Eldon said quietly. I am to record everything. I am only doing my duty. He finished the final mark on the page. It was a solemn image of the angel, majestic and unyielding. Ascalon, have the blood guard watch him, Sanguinius ordered. He barely breathed a sigh before striding on, his wings stirring the air. Something in him had heard an invitation from the abyss, a call he despised. He gripped his spear. The blood angels fell silent around him, waiting for the angel's lead. The rain had stopped, and a smell, bloody, bitter, spread through the ruins. He stepped through the open gate as if the world itself welcomed them. Inside, he heard a tyrannical voice and something tearing. He saw a creature rent and reformed in his peripheral vision, but he did not hesitate. This was not a place for fate to chain him to. He moved forward. Angron arrived not long after. He found the gate already open and had the same impression that someone had been here before him. Attempts to contact Korga were patchy and intermittent. The last transmissions from Gel were a chaos of roars and gunfire. We arrived, and our librarian went mad. I don't know what the enemy did to him, one voice reported. Kufas approached Angron, holding a blood-spattered locket. He said to give this to you, he said. Angron took the relic of his fallen scion, and an inscrutable shadow crossed his face. Lord Angron, the space here is segmented, a librarian warned. He had sensed the place fractured into pockets of reality, the source of the disturbance centered in that building, an evil power being born within its walls. No matter what's inside, Angron said, looping the necklace over his arm, we must drag it out. He picked up his World Eater's plasma gun, stepped back, and blasted the remainder of the gate to pieces with a single, contemptuous shot. He entered with a sneer. Rain fell even inside the ruin. Corpses littered the floor, and Angron's eyes went cold. They were blood angels. He had been first to arrive, but these bodies showed Sanguinius had beaten him here. Khorne moved to his side. My lord, do we need to scout ahead? He asked in a low voice. At a time like this, splitting up is not wise. Angron dismissed the suggestion. They moved together and found the carnage worse than it first appeared. A blood angel crouched over a brother's corpse, gnawing at his skull. Khorne settled into a defensive posture and called softly to the deranged warrior. Hey, cousin. As they closed, the blood angel looked up. For a heartbeat, there was a glint of sanity in his bloodshot eyes. Is Sanguinius here? He rasped. Angron stepped forward and placed his palm on the warrior's chest. He felt fury and madness trying to choke the soul, but his own psychic signature pushed through. The blood angel's expression cleared, hope flashing across his features. Lord Angron, save my lord, he begged. Then he coughed blood and died. Khorne's axe had already severed the arm that held the roaring chainsword. The others pinned the crazed cousin down. Angron muttered, Warhounds, advance. He needed answers. What had Sanguinius done here, and how had Korga's contingent been driven into such a ruin? Sanguinius led his scions down a long passage, cutting through packs of strange, red-skinned monsters. There were no signs of the Death Guard or the Warhounds, no scattered corpses of aliens, only a floor slick with blood where someone had gathered the bodies. Bolter fire rang out ahead, and Sanguinius led his company toward the sound, not noticing the darkness swallowing his rear guard. As he hurried on, he glanced back and saw only a few dozen blood angels still following. He realized, too late, that he had been baited. Bloodletters poured from the shadows, thick as a tide, their eyes fixed on the angel in the center of the corridor. No creature, it seemed, could resist the pull of Sanguinius. "Form ranks, engage," Sanguinius roared, spear flashing. He strode from the heart of the circle and cleaved through scores of demons in a single sweep. His wings unfurled, a white and terrifying banner in the dim. Eldon watched from a sheltered spot, heart racing as he sketched every stroke. The blood angels closed around their lord, hacking and burning, and using their librarian's psychic might to freeze or incinerate foes. The corridor became a slick carpet of blood and ash. Even power boots slipped. The crack of rapid bolter fire came from a side passage. "Charge with me!" Sanguinius cried. He lifted a slain bloodletter high like a standard and pointed with it toward the sound. Eldon, still being borne by a blood angel, turned the page and began to sketch again, utterly absorbed in his duty despite the carnage. A bloodguard who had intended to scoff at the mortal's little sketchbook instead stopped short. "Well drawn, mortal," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. Farther down the ruin, Khorne cursed under his breath. The ghost warriors he had sent out had fallen silent. He could not tell whether their last contact had been a week ago or 3 days. The Death Guard had fought a bloody path through the place. Typhon was strapped to a stretcher, an emblem of how badly things had gone. When they had tried to shut a door behind them, they found they couldn't. Something beyond it reached back and tore at their minds and bodies. Typhon had been dragged out after the first losses, but Inzar Tyrus was missing, and one by one the men had been taken like prey. Khorne's right arm had been crippled when it had last met that monster. Now the sounds of fighting drew him and what remained of his force toward the fray. During the retreat, Theseus had been indispensable, helping to hold a line and to pick men back up. Khorne raised his remaining arm in a scanning sweep. "Your physical condition is poor," an automated voice intoned. "I've scanned ahead. That thing hasn't caught up." "Do you know which legion's warriors are ahead?" someone asked as they closed in, the answer hanging uncertain in the thick, blood-scented air. Khorne frowned, confused. "I'm not sure, but I can feel it's not the Warhounds." Sanguinius answered without hesitation. "My first assessment is that it's the Blood Angels." The roar of battle was deafening. Through the bloody haze, Khorne saw Sanguinius approach, and Sanguinius saw him. When the two forces met, Khorne's men fell into position, replacing the outer perimeter of the Blood Guard. "Primarch Sanguinius?" Khorne said, lowering his arm in respect. "Do you know a way out?" Sanguinius looked at him, then shook his head, but there was no sign of disappointment. "This place is wrapped in a strange energy, like a small warp pocket with no sense of time or space. We've traced its source to the center of the structure. We tried to shut it down, but we failed." Khorne quickly relayed what he had learned. Creatures kept spilling out from there. The Death Guard and we took heavy losses. Khorne met the Primarch's gaze. With an imperial demigod like himself present, Khorne had assumed they could deal with whatever lurked here swiftly enough. "Leave that creature to me. Angron is here as well. We should rendezvous with him." Sanguinius thought of his brother. If Khorne, a warhound, had traced the source, Angron would surely follow. "Do you know where it is?" he asked. Khorne nodded. "Lead the way." A counter flickered somewhere below as Mortarion and his death shroud climbed up from the underhive. The display kept changing. Once a 7 flashed, then an 8, then a 9, but the numbers were meaningless compared to what was arriving. Mortarion ignored the pain burning through his body. In the distance he saw a chimera, a vehicle from the Warhounds, parked before the elevator. When Gel climbed down from it, Mortarion fixed his attention on Varys, the apothecary standing behind him. "Where is Angron?" Mortarion asked. "He's above, my lord," Gel replied. "And Sanguinius as well," the report said. He cut himself off when Mortarion stepped onto the elevator. Gel only managed a helpless sigh before Hypnos sent a few more rounds downrange. Marble and stone were rotting. Flagstones underfoot were as soft as mud and slick with blood. This was enemy ground, and the red thirst gnawed at the blood angels. As Kalen felt his throat dry and itch with hunger, there was enough blood here for a feast. He looked to his gene father and felt the thirst ease. Each blood angel carried his own poison, but the Primarch was their cure. Beneath the piles of Confederacy humans and Xenos lay hands thrust through skulls. The corpses of blood angels and others had been wrongfully made into seats and trophies. The sight stunned Sanguinius's men. Khorne reacted first. He fired his last 2 bolter rounds. The whine of those shells snapped the rest of the blood angels awake, and they began to ready their weapons. Before them loomed the heavy main gate of the building, their objective. The blood angels gathered and unleashed a barrage. Sanguinius stood at the front, weapon in hand. He recalled the ancient forbidden texts in his gene father's library, the accounts of demons and spirits. The existence of these things was no longer speculative. Humanoid horrors strode and leaped among the howling red canines that charged in wave after wave. Khorne raised his axe and cleaved through a beast. Blood sprayed. Theseus fought at his side, cutting down enemies with brutal efficiency. Sanguinius watched that valiant warhound with interest as they fought their way to the entrance of the main hall. A Death Guard warrior booted the great doors open. A laugh drifted out, not human, but animal, triumphant. "My brother, you've arrived," the voice called. Sanguinius followed the sound and saw a monstrous sight. An evil sitting upon a throne built of corpses, a dais of slain blood angels. Among the wreckage, the blue of Wraith Company and the green of a few power armors showed this creature had hunted many imperial superhumans. Khorne barked a warning. This was the being that had shattered one of his arms and left Typhon near death. "Do you like the scene, Golden One?" the creature taunted. "Sanguinius of Baal," it continued. "Oh, we all love blood, don't we?" The monster rose. Black smoke rolled about its muscled torso. Its flesh was the red of rage. It bore a great bronze axe and wore bronze armor pitted with a history of violence. Yellow fangs jutted from its face like eternal malice. Saliva dripped, corroding helmets beneath it. "I only see a monster about to be slaughtered," Sanguinius roared, and the beast answered with a bellowing laugh. "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Kabanda, Bloodthirster, a great general of Khorne. And you, my brother, we are not so different." The Blood Guard Terminators bristled with fury at the desecration around them. All about Kabanda, crimson demons swarmed, and black-furred hounds reeked of brimstone. The chamber was too small for either force to deploy in full. It would become an 8-sided meat grinder. Both sides waited for their leader's commands. Sanguinius stepped forward, and so did Kabanda. White wings and black wings made a stark contrast across the blood-slick floor. For a heartbeat, Khorne felt the daemon was the inverse of the Primarch, everything base where Sanguinius was noble. "You don't need to fight us," Kabanda said. "Blood and slaughter, is that not your path?" Sanguinius answered. "The power of Khorne is unmatched," Kabanda growled. "Your resistance is but a ripple in our ocean. Even your gene father avoids us. He fears us." Sanguinius's eyes flashed. Kabanda saw the anger, and for an instant the Primarch smiled, as if disgusted. "Be gone, beast, or I'll cut you down," Kabanda roared back. His face darkened. "I'll break your wings and make you earthbound." They collided like thunder. Only Khorne could watch both demigods with something like detached focus. Kabanda moved with a swiftness that belied his bulk. The clash of his axe against Sanguinius's spear sent sparks flying. Kabanda swept low. Sanguinius's white plumage rose, scattering feathers into the air as the axe carved empty space. The Primarch landed and charged like a knight, his spear grazing Kabanda's face and opening a seam of flesh. Kabanda gave no quarter. As a champion of Khorne, he unleashed a barbed bronze whip that coiled around the Primarch's spear and began to wrestle with it. The whip seemed to have a will of its own, its serrated tip scything inches above Sanguinius's head. Bolter fire cracked overhead and both combatants turned. Khorne held a twin-linked bolter he'd taken from a cousin, firing one-handed. Sanguinius reacted first. He drew his longsword and drove the daemon back. Kabanda roared, dropping the whip and bringing his axe down to parry the Primarch's blows. A thrust from Sanguinius sent the spear spinning from the ground. It bit into Kabanda's chest until an axe blocked the blow. Sanguinius closed, his blade raking the daemon's face. Black blood smeared across bronze cheek plates. Kabanda staggered and spat teeth fragments from his maw, grinning. "You fight well," he sneered, "but you have no equal. You're wasting your efforts." "Again, little angel," he bellowed and surged forward. Rain fell as faint singing drifted through the air. Mortarion raised his war scythe, tasting the unusual tang on the wind. The sound seemed to come from all directions, and unease coiled in him like a living thing. The ground began to writhe. When the first victim showed, it was worse than disease. One of the death shroud's ceramite plates darkened and cracked. Slimy flesh burst through the armor and bloated strangely. Mortarion swung his scythe and severed the transformed limb as the scion howled. Whatever this was, it wasn't a simple contagion. The twisted flesh birthed deformed offspring, mouths opening in the swollen meat that exhaled a putrid green gas. Mortarion's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, reaching to end his scion's suffering, but resistance pushed him back as helplessness clawed at him. Rain hissed and steamed as it hit the corrupted ground. "Mortarion," a short, mocking voice called, and Mortarion felt a chill crawl under his skin. "I've come to take you home." A gargantuan form emerged through the downpour, a bloated, misshapen titan smiling with rows of yellowed teeth. It leaned on a staff like an ancient man. Mortarion raised his lantern and fired. Bolter shells thudded into the thing as if into cotton and vanished. Laughter pealed around him. "We are different branches of the same tree, Mortarion," the abomination intoned. "We rejoice at your rebirth, as we do your brother Angron. He refused us, but soon he will know the Father's benevolence." Mortarion watched the demons circling like a tide. These were unlike the foes he'd cut down before. He saw the Death Shroud, who had begged with his eyes for a clean death, something dignified. Mortarion required no more prompting. Despite his wounds, he was a Primarch. He moved. "Never," he spat. The bloated thing, Rotigus, Rot Speaker and High Priest of Nurgle, laughed and introduced himself as the Benevolent. Mortarion did not parley. He swung his war scythe. The first clean stroke took his own scion's head. There was no saving that body. Mortarion led the Death Shroud into the Nurgle horde, cutting silently and brutally through things already half dead. The rain changed texture. Mushrooms and pustules sprouted on the flesh of friend and foe alike. When the first shroud reported a fungus erupting across his body, Mortarion answered with a single word: resilience. They advanced anyway. Mortarion was desperate. He didn't know what sorcery had twisted his scions, only that Rotigus had to be cut down if any of them were to be saved. The demon's gnarled staff struck the sodden earth with a thud. Mortarion felt the ground turn to mire beneath his boots, sucking and heaving like a living thing. "Your father, the Cursed One, deceived you, Mortarion. Why do you fight me? We are your true family. He lied to you and your brothers. We are the ones who stand by you." Rotigus's voice rolled over Mortarion like a rot-scented tide. Rain fell in a fetid green, and flies swarmed about the putrid sorcerer. He drew a rusted greatsword, and from the huge maw in his chest, the Nurglings spilled out, hopping and squealing among squirming maggots. Mortarion rushed forward. His scythe came down in a clean arc. A rusted chain snapped toward him. Mortarion dodged and drove his war scythe into Rotigus's chest cavity, but the creature showed no pain. It only watched Mortarion calmly. By the time Mortarion noticed the 4 chains anchoring his body, it was too late. Rotigus discarded staff and sword, mere distractions meant to fix Mortarion's attention, then grinned, a slick, long tongue flicking from his mouth. "My brother," Rotigus crooned, "I will lead you to witness the power of Father Nurgle." He opened his arms as if to embrace Mortarion to that heaving, corrupt chest. The Death Shroud lunged to help, but they were too far. Putrid corpses closed in, cutting off any path of retreat. "Recite his name with me, my brother." Rotigus's voice carried an uncanny authority. Nurgle. The name struck Mortarion like a physical blow. Behind Rotigus, a larger phantom shimmered. A Nurgling clambered onto Mortarion's helmet and peered at him with grotesque affection. "Hey!" the little thing laughed. "I refuse." Mortarion tore at the chains with everything he had. Rotigus's voice slithered in his head. "Don't you understand yet, Mortarion? We watched you on Barbarous. From the moment you arrived, you belonged to us. The Cursed One stole you away. You and we are family." Rotigus's drool spattered against Mortarion's scale armor. It hissed and corroded. Confusion filled Mortarion's eyes. "Then what am I?" A flash of blue-white cut through the rain. Mortarion jolted awake. Angron had arrived. The warhounds were ghostly in the downpour, a blur of red and iron. Angron roared and leaped into the fray, his battle axe a spinning promise of violence, a plasma pistol spitting fire. "Demon!" he spat, disgust curling his voice. He had fought things like this before in the abyssal canyons. Nothing in him liked them. The illusory world wavered. Rodigus frowned. He sensed something alien, not warp power, but a hard technology from the materium. Angron hacked through the putrid corpses in a single streak, severing the sorceress chains with the raw force of his charge. The librarian's psychic wards flared to protect the brothers. Khorne was close behind, and the battle erupted. Mortarion felt himself stumbling, and then a pair of huge hands caught him. Angron held him up. "Mortarion, can you still fight?" he barked. A spore sprouted across Mortarion's breastplate at that instant. Angron threw him clear on instinct. Mortarion skidded through mud and rain until the muck covered him, a small, sodden statue. If not for his respirator, he would have swallowed enough filth to choke. Angron watched him rise and realized, painfully, what he'd done. "Brother, are you all right?" Angron called. Guilt and brute cheer mixed. Mortarion rose, dirt streaking his hair and armor, and lifted a hand to forbid approach. The Reaper crushed the new spore between his fingers. He felt numbers slipping away somewhere in him, strange but real. He pulled off his mask. Muddy water dripped from his beard. He saw Angron's contrite face and could not deny that the barbarian had come to save him. "Barbarian," Mortarion said quietly. Angron laughed, booming and wild. He raised his axe and pointed toward the blasphemous thing as if it were a rival nail to pull. "Ha! To hell with you and your scions, idiots!" A familiar, distorted voice crackled in Angron's skull. "Nail?" Angron grinned inwardly. He had thought the system AI would stay dormant longer. "Angron, Unit 2!" The AI's voice was electronic and laced with irritation. The upgrade was not finished. It had only meant to patch some modules, not fully reboot. Once it smelled chaos, it pushed outward, projecting the Emperor's power and waking. Angron felt a gentle electric prod as the AI synapsed into him. "You are an idiot," it said simply. "I need you to get close to that thing," the AI said. "The materium is trying to expel it. I must accelerate that process." "How close?" Angron asked. "Preferably negative distance," the AI answered, deadpan. Angron blinked. The AI continued, "If you won't, I'll contact Unit 14. Angron ground his teeth. Then he roared, "Brothers, cover me!" But Mortarion did not wait for orders. He charged, muttering numbers under his breath, war scythe swinging with grim, cold precision. Angron, who still bore scars of the last time they had faced Nurgle's filth, hesitated only a moment before following. Rodigus tried to inject psychic slogans into the minds around him. "We are one body. Our blood is thicker than water," but Mortarion carved into him like lightning. Flesh and intestine were torn away in great choking chunks. "There may be side effects," the AI warned over Angron's synapses. The new module was still loading. "Bring it on!" Angron shouted. He barked an order at Khorne. The Terra veterans answered by unleashing meltiflamers. Rain that had been green and oily flared and ignited. The putrid corpses burst into flame and turned to ash. Khorne yanked a trapped death guard free with one hand as if plucking a rag doll. Far off, a warp gate peeled open beneath a flare of lightning. Something was pressing to escape, tentatively at first, then more insistent. Time seemed to slow. Angron's perception stretched until he felt everything, the shivering of molecules, the lazy arc of planets. It felt as if his soul had lifted out of his skin. 2 points of light marked Gel and Korga on the ground, and a demigod nearby doubled with a sick wrenching in his gut. Angron let it sit. There was no space for hesitation. He raised his axe and ran. Mortarion grappled with Rodigus. The creature was stubborn, wounds barely slowed it, and its poisoned whispers crept into Mortarion's mind. "We are inseparable. You and I are brothers. I'll cleave you to hell!" Angron roared, smashing his axe into Rodigus. Flesh tore away in slabs. "You perform a futile act, Angron, my dear brother." Rodigus purred with a grotesque smile. "There are shards of truth in the madness. Catan fragments, like the beasts of the old night, feed and sleep in the physical universe but can hold titanic power. Most shards betrayed each other or were broken by Necron treachery, but even a fragment's strength can overturn a world if properly used. The materium obeys rules and order. The warp cares for neither. The system AI had found a way to intermingle the two. As a high-dimensional intelligence, it could not spill its full soul power freely. It needed media, vessels. Angron was a conduit. The Skatan shard was another. The patched module reinforced physical law, making warp energies dissipate faster in the materium. That force was more than a Primarch should shoulder. Angron felt bile rise in his throat. Rotigas's rotten flesh sloughed away with terrifying unhooked writhing, organs losing any anchor. Around them the rain stilled. Angron! Rotigas howled, rage finally raw and unrefined rather than seductive. He raised his staff and felt something pushing against him, an unfamiliar force, the physical universe itself turning to expel him. Mortarion stood before Angron, his war scythe steady as it blocked Rotigas's assault. The ground around his feet sagged, blood seeped from his calves. A low, muffled growl escaped him, predatory and cold. Angron, join the formation, he shouted, the final words garbled by whatever interference had clogged the battlefield. Seeing that his command had an effect, Mortarion raised his voice. Angron swayed as if drunk, but the roar that followed snapped him awake. He fought down nausea and dizziness as Guilliman's module surged into high gear, clearing Angron's vision. The multi-threaded processors in the system heated under the load. Fight fast, the system AI barked, simultaneously sweeping up every available battlefield channel. Signals that the gods had been choking on opened like lungs filling. At the moment the system AI linked with the battlefield, Gel's overheated mind cleared as if plunged into ice. Varys! Cold, cold, cold! He roared and began executing every command from the Legion co-lord without hesitation. From mountain outposts to the open plains, every potential chaos node was relayed to the orbital fleet. The Warhounds, this war machine of flesh and steel, roared to life. Lothara Selen on the Redemption exhaled sharply as new directives fed through. If Gel moved like a high-speed automaton, the system AI was a super-quantum engine. Orders cascaded, outcomes calculated, the future folded into the co-lord's intent. Orbital bombardment began. Gunships and wave after wave of knights descended. The Storm Legion came down hard with a single mission: rescue the besieged imperial superhumans. If Gel's commands steadied and tilted the scales, the Legion co-lord had smashed the table and was tearing the players off it. There would be one victor. Unit 2, charge straight ahead, the system AI relayed. A strange rhythmic buzzing filled Angron's ears. It resolved into a deeper sound, the measured breathing of the planet beneath his boots. Data streamed into his mind from everywhere at once. For the Emperor, he roared and surged toward Rotigas. Rotigas had never felt such discomfort. Space seemed to constrict around him. The world pitched and rolled. A sour, churning pressure built in his chest as warp energy flared through his corrupted flesh. His innards convulsed, forcing up foreign matter. For the first time in eons, Rotigas understood nausea. Mortarion shoved the staff from Rotigas's grasp, cut down 2 flying nurglings, and turned to a small, ugly nurgling that had crawled near. The creature bared its teeth as if about to speak. A red force, pure and violent, burst from the void and tore the little thing apart right in front of Mortarion. Khorne. No, a massive psychic shockwave slammed into Mortarion's mind, and he spat a mouthful of blood. Angron, he cried, entrusting what hope he had to his brother. Angron, mask removed, staggered forward and charged Rotigas. Rotigas heaved and vomited foul, corrosive bile that splattered across Angron, and Angron, in turn, retched onto the ground as he ran. Mortarion gagged, sick from the stench. Angron drove his war cry into Rotigas's head. The daemon shrieked and began to contort as the warp rift around it hungrily devoured nearby energies. For a moment, the fabric of reality around them trembled. Then, with a pop, Angron dropped from the sky, slammed into the muddy earth. Gel's coordinates. Have the Fang of the Hounds fire continuously, someone ordered. Hypnos copy, bombardment ready, came the reply. Shells screamed down and tore the surrounding buildings into rubble. Angron rose slowly, still dizzy, and crawled to Mortarion's side. Mortarion trembled, every limb shaking. Is it over? He wondered. What kind of thing was this? When he saw Angron struggle to his feet again, Mortarion felt both relief and disbelief. Angron, he began. Angron could not hold it. He vomited the rest of his stomach straight into Mortarion's face. Mortarion, struck by filth and surprise, gagged and reeled. Angron continued to heave until he fainted from exhaustion. Mortarion stared at his brother. irritated, incredulous, and oddly grateful all at once. Angron lay draped over Mortarion, dazed, drooling. Foul saliva dripped onto Mortarion's head and finally roused him. Mortarion, enraged by the indignity, punched Angron in the face so hard his knuckles cracked. "Angron," he roared. Angron swayed, eyes full of strange stars and shifting images. These were the so-called side effects of the nails finally taking hold. The world spun in bizarre arcs. Mortarion appeared alternately fat and thin. The war scythe writhed like a snake. Mortarion hauled Angron upright. "You all right?" he asked. "Not really. The after effects are bad. You helping me?" Angron asked with a weak, mirthless laugh as Mortarion's form flickered before his vision. "Yes." Mortarion glanced skyward. Signals from the Blood Angels and their scions had come through. The Blood Angels were engaged above. "When did Sanguinius ascend?" he asked. "I don't know," Angron admitted. "Also, can your head stop bobbing up and down? It's terrifying." Mortarion looked at his brother for a long moment, then counted himself sensible of one hard truth. Angron was useful. "Go find Sanguinius. I'm still able. Help me to move." He shoved, and Angron obeyed. "Go!" Mortarion shouted into the maelstrom, and then the scene cut to another brutal engagement. Sanguinius opened his eyes into battle, his short sword stabbed toward Kabanda, who laughed in a voice like dry leaves and spun his heavy battle axe. The two traded blows, but Sanguinius's natural agility gave him the edge. His strikes landed faster and smarter. With a roar, Kabanda briefly gave ground, snapped up a serrated whip, and lashed it toward the Primarch's face. The arc nicked Sanguinius, scattering feathers into the air. Before they could fall, Sanguinius moved with lightning speed and seized the barbed whip with his bare hand. The whip writhed, his gauntlet cracked under the strain. "Get lost!" he snapped, pulling with everything he had. Kabanda staggered and lost his balance, and Sanguinius didn't hesitate. The hilt of his sword smashed into the demon's face, and black blood spray answered the blow. Kabanda reeled. "Ha! Little angel! You are like me. Witness Khorne's glory." Kabanda howled. "Embrace your true nature, and you will become Khorne's champion." Sanguinius snorted. "Your delusions are amusing. Should I fetch a doctor to check your head?" That jeer drove Kabanda into a blind rage. Eyes burning with fury, he charged, arms wide. The two met in the sky, black and white wings beating, metal against metal. The long blade lashed across Kabanda's chest. The demon retaliated by tearing at the angel's armor with monstrous jaws. The stench of his breath made Sanguinius grimace. He dodged the bite and met those hellish eyes with calm resolve. Gravity dragged them to the ground. Sanguinius struck Kabanda's wrist with his hilt. The blow made the axe fly free. With a nimble step, he snatched a heavy chain on Kabanda's person and pivoted, planting his foot on the demon's chest as his blade plunged into the enemy's flesh. The force threw Sanguinius clear. Kabanda howled and rolled amid the corpses. The angel closed to finish the job and drew his blade. "Wait!" Kabanda screamed. The massive sword rose and sliced toward Kabanda's neck. "Your father deceived you. Why have you fallen so low? It was he who abandoned you." Kabanda spat, trying to worm doubt into the Primarch's breast. "We are not your lie, little angel." The words struck Sanguinius like a dagger. The sword's tip hovered at Kabanda's throat. The hesitation let Kabanda act. In a sudden flourish, his long whip struck like a viper. Its fangs sank and wrapped around the Primarch's legs. Sanguinius cried out as the chains and barbs did their work. Countless blood angels watched in horror as their gene father screamed and his legs were torn away. "You refused me, little angel," Kabanda mocked, sneering at the blood angels firing desperately at him. "Now you will know unforgettable pain." Sanguinius stared back, face set. "Try it," he said. Section 107. The Primarch spat a mouthful of blood and tightened his grip on his longsword, teeth clenched against the agony. Kabanda watched the charging blood angels and raised his massive battle axe, a grim smile on his face, a hellish flame, determined to teach the angels what true pain was. Sanguinius glimpsed his scions in the rush, Rogarth of the Blood Guard, Captain Nagel of the 24th Company, his brave sons. The scarlet sun began to rise in the center of the field, and the angel desperately looked at his warriors, overwhelmed by the oncoming power. P.S. First update, 38 Greece Celsius, 37.5 Greece, 37.8 Greece. I've been burning up all day, otherwise this update wouldn't be so late. I might have to rest after one more update. Nurgle's blessings. Tsk. In Sanguinius's mind, the deaths of his scions did not fully register. He saw a dark blue figure at the very front. Darkness tried to seize his mind, but he halted himself from falling into that abyss. Kabanda stared in surprise at the warhound, Khorne, who had withstood his blow. The creature stood like the leader of the Blood Angels before everyone. He remembered him. In the dark, Kabanda had broken one of his arms. That shouldn't have been possible. Kabanda had expected the angel to be in a deep slumber after the deaths of his scions. When he woke, he would see his sons descend into bloodlust, their noble rhetoric ripped away. Leaderless, the Blood Angels would be prime candidates for a fall. But now, everything was ruined by the little thing standing before him. "You deserve to die," Kabanda roared. Nothing would thwart his plan. No one could stop the way of Khorne. Roar. Body is connecting. Body right arm damage. New module embedded. Praise the co-lord. Synchronization rate 300%. Theseus, piloting Khorne, lowered his frame and bared his teeth in a snarl. The lightning claw was drawn. The arm that should have been shattered rose again. Steam hissed from Khorne's joints. This was the limit of Khorne's current chassis, Theseus knew. "Roar! He's mine! You go save the Primarch!" Theseus shouted at the warriors behind him, but the Blood Angels only saw Khorne roaring at them. They could not hear his words. "They can't hear," the system reported. "It's because your language nerves are too hard to find." "Shut up! Theseus doesn't have time!" Kabanda's mouth curved. He found this little warhound unusually interesting. He abandoned Sanguinius as he moved, leaving the Primarch to roar helplessly on the ground. "Die, ant!" Kabanda raised his battle axe. The next instant, Khorne's form vanished from his sight. Instinct told Kabanda that the creature had slipped behind him. He brought the great axe down to block. Pfft! A bloody hole opened clean through Kabanda's torso. Ascalon and Lateron rushed to Sanguinius's side. Apothecary Meros knelt and began to probe the Primarch's wounds. "I must help him." Sanguinius tried to rise but failed. "Captain Khorne can only delay him. The 7th echelon will carve a bloody path for you to find our sire. Take Typhon with you as well." A wraith glided forward and spoke slowly, looking at the surrounding Blood Angels. "I will not stand aside and watch my brother's scions fall here." With the help of the Blood Guard, the angel hauled himself partly upright. "With all due respect, Lord Sanguinius, our sire will not tolerate your fall any more than we will. Regroup and avenge us. 7th echelon," the wraith roared. "Carve a bloody path for our cousin." The wraith turned its gaze to Khorne at the center of the field. "Co-lord, when will you arrive? You damned ant, I could crush thousands of you." Kabanda's bellow made Khorne laugh, deep inside the machine's core. Theseus watched his implants drive one after another of Kabanda's defenses open. He could feel something tearing inside the demon, a ghost of pain leaking through the interface. Theseus could not mask all of it. "Roar!" Kabanda peered at Khorne, who had collapsed in a twisted posture as if having found something. "Oh, you've activated some secret art. How long can you hold it?" "Mortal, tell me!" he bellowed. Kabanda watched the little angel being dragged away and grew impatient with the hide-and-seek. He clenched his axe, and the long whip in his other hand seemed to take on a will of its own, lashing straight toward Khorne. 30 seconds. Theseus ignored the whip. He drew the plasma pistol at his hip. The sight of a World Eater's plasma piece set Kabanda on edge. He heard the great hinges begin to groan. A massive door began to swing. Kabanda, drenched in blood, felt a strange aura flood the field. New target. Theseus was running out of options. If Khorne, this machine, kept holding, his neural core would seize. He had dumped every bit of heat he could. Broad white wings unfurled like a final banner. Sanguinius used them to shield the ones behind him from the attack pouring through the opening. Blood sprayed. Using his last strength, the Primarch shoved his scions away. He raised his longsword and stepped forward. The long whip whistled toward him. The impact sent him sprawling. Kabanda roared, baffled. Why was a keeper of secrets here? The newcomer, Kalis, had stepped through a flicker of blue warp. "Lord of Change," the phrase slammed into Kabanda's mind like an accusation. That bastard had interfered with the Blood God's plan. A demonic hoof ground into Sanguinius's chest as Kalis inhaled the scene like a connoisseur. "Hello there, little angel. I am the Lord of Duality, Kalis, he purred. Kalis smiled, watching Kabanda being toyed with by what he called an ant. He laughed aloud. Leadership under the blood god, he scoffed. Ridiculous. Get back to your palace, Kabanda roared, but Kalis paid him no mind. The Keeper of Secrets slipped past the enraged demon, evading each furious strike with terrifying grace. This isn't first come, first served, Kabanda. You should be asking the little angel who he prefers to go with, Kalis taunted. I truly adore this one. He grinned openly, and then Kabanda hurled his battle axe. Don't worry, Kalis said as he danced aside. I'll take you home after I'm done with him. He moved like a predator through a field of flowers, casually severing the heads of nearby blood angels as though plucking blooms. Your master's plan is riddled with loopholes. You thought you had abandoned us? No, we made a new arrangement with the Lord of Change. Now the show has just begun, Kalis announced, proud and venomous. I will kill you. Kabanda snarled and drove Korga back. These two seemed to be hostile entities. What do we do now? Theseus asked the AI. Await rescue. I have already sent the coordinates to the Legion co-lord. How much longer until our sire arrives? Unknown. There are too many warp entities here. Theseus kept receiving streams of data from the system. Good news, we might be saved. P.S. Second update, I'm gonna sleep now. Also, everyone, don't sleep with your windows open. I'm a cautionary tale. I think the fever will be gone by tomorrow morning. Volume 1, Chapter 190, 180, The Nail. Save us. That was the good news, at least. Then, what was the bad? Korga didn't have to ask. The bloodthirsty demon had shifted its gaze from him onto this new entity. Both of them seemed hungrier for Sanguinius, which was far worse. The Wraiths and the Blood Angels tried to hack a bloody corridor through the tide of succubi to reach the Primarch. Sanguinius, crippled, wing-broken, still felled swaths of them with a single swing, but the creatures poured through the open door in numbers that overwhelmed the defenders. In an instant, the Blood Angels' formation disintegrated. These things are not of the material universe, Ascalon thought as he watched them. These were creatures the Blood Angels had never faced. Whether Xenos, Daemon, or something else, Baal, and perhaps the entire Imperium, had never seen such things. Bloodguard, rally to me, Ascalon roared, lifting his longsword. The Bloodguard gathered around him in ragged order. They needed a single, crushing charge, a path strong enough to reach the Primarch. Sanguinius remained silent. Despite crippled legs and a torn wing, an Imperial demigod could still cleave through those things where he stood. Yet the deaths of his scions struck him like the tearing of feathers from his own wings. Each loss, whether mighty or small, near or far, hammered at his mind. Chant my name, a voice hissed, and darkness pressed inward. Sanguinius clenched his inner will. He would not allow this entity to breach his mental sanctuary. Praise my name, the chorus rose up. Noisy whispers echoed across his mind like surf. He could still hold the walls for now, but what of his brothers? He pictured Angron, Mortarion. Were they suffering the same assault? How fared them? Say it, little angel. Say it. The voices urged. Say what? Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. Sanguinius stayed silent, his resolve unbroken. I can help you save your scions. Say but the word, bend to me, and I will grant you supreme power. Another wave smashed into the field. Sanguinius refused to be anyone's thrall. The sacrifices of his sons were noble and meaningful. He could not throw them aside. A tremendous impact sounded not far off. Sanguinius looked up and saw the terrible sight. Kabanda and Kalis were clashing with brutal force. Each blow bent reality. Ripples laced the air. No blood angel could approach them. Do something, he thought. He had to do something. He was not a prize to be taken by any god or demon. He was a prince of the Imperium and would not be dragged off like prey. In the shadows, he spotted Korga again, bleeding and battered, creeping around the fringe of the duel. Sanguinius feared the warhound might die at any moment, yet he still edged toward the rim of the battle between the two demons. Section 118, Are the Warhounds All Crazy? Angron thought, stomach twisting. Over the comms, Theseus barked through the link. Legion co-lord, we're in position. The beacon's been sent. Korga's unit can still take one more impact if we're lucky. If luck ran out, Theseus felt certain Korga would chase him down and tear him limb from limb on holy ground. The system AI chimed in, clipped and clinical. Topographical map, scanner, warp barrier. Unit 2 status? Are you stable? Better. Ugh. Angron rasped, though he felt nothing of the sort. Numbers crawled across his vision like ants. Tiny figures clambered from Mortarian's shoulder and played with him. He retched. Mortarian sat with his eyes closed, lips moving in a stream of muttered syllables that could have been prayers or curses. No one could tell. The system's voice was sharp in Angron's head. Arrived at the designated location, Unit 2. Push Mortarian out for me. Without hesitation, Angron kicked the meditating Mortarian off the gunship. Mortarian, stunned and furious, tumbled through the air and looked back at Angron as if to curse him, while Angron merely grinned into empty space. His HUD pinged. His weapon, the system noted. Angron reacted, throwing the weapon after Mortarian. The numerical overlay hadn't warned him of this. Mortarian fell into a storm of debris and shellfire. He swore to himself that when this was over, he would have words with his brother. The angled fire punched a ragged hole in the roof of the ruined building below. Mortarian seized his scythe in mid-fall as the world detonated around him. On the ground, Kabanda and Keyless paused their duel and turned toward the shape emerging from the smoke. Sanguinius stood there, surrounded by a swirl of demonic flesh. Countless daemonettes clung and writhed at his feet, but he held a war scythe in his hands, and the barrage nearby gave him cover. Kabanda roared, only to be struck across the face by Kaelus's whip. The sudden arrival of a third combatant had made the fight worse, not easier. Mortarian swung his scythe. His movements were sluggish. His rebreather's poison stores were almost gone. His bones felt loose, his organs sliding. Resilience, he told himself. Screw your resilience. Screw Angron, he spat. He could no longer stomach what his brother had done. Like green lightning, he poured his fury into Banda. Kaelus watched and, with a contemptuous smile, slipped away from the front line and tried to make for the angel. Can you still move? Korga demanded. Try it if you want to die, Theseus answered, hands steady on Korga's wounds. There was simply no dying here. Not yet. Sanguinius bit his lip as something charged at him. A heavy weight hit the ground and Angron stumbled into sight. Hope flared, then sank away as Sanguinius saw the way Angron spun, eyes rolling disoriented. Angron, he cried. Don't call me. I'm getting you out of here. Angron snapped, clawing at the air. He grimaced and rubbed his head. This side effect is a real pain. Nail, help, he barked into the breach. The system answered at once. Coming. Volume 1, Chapter 191. I'll beat you into watermelon juice. Module loading. Synchronization rate, 25%. Why was the sync so poor? The system AI registered confusion like a temperature drop. It felt the God of War's roar in its control loop as Angron rolled his eyes. Sanguinius watched his brother and heard the suppressed animal sound lodged in his throat. When the metallic cable wings unfurled, Angron froze for a moment. Hundreds of dense, green cords snapped into being behind him. He glanced at Sanguinius, and the cords thinned, whitening into strands of pure light. Angron roared and lunged. Before him, Kaelus, keeper of secrets, watched the sudden wings with soft, hungry amusement. It had 4 arms, 2 grasping curved blades, 2 lashing with whips. The system's database could not decide whether Kaelus was more male or female. It only knew that whatever this new module on Angron was, it did not play well with warp-touched entities. Pure, brutal physicality recoiled at the warp. Primarch or not, Angron had been made to hate this. The 2 dark god scions had been split between the Primarchs. Mortarian bled and struggled, Kabanda limped and bled more, and Angron's psychic tether to them flickered. Angron telepathically relayed, short and clearer than he'd sounded all day. I feel much better. The system agreed. That module is a burden. Next time I will try to use this ability less. Kaelus stepped forward, the creature's exposed skin and jingling trinkets setting the system AI on edge. The warp's hold here was loosening. Daemons would soon be forced back to the immaterium. Kaelus purred, distractedly elegant. I have never seen a creation like you. This machine of yours is marvelous. My lord of pleasure would love you. Why not come home with me and the little angel? I can't wait to caress you, it added with a smile. The system did not reply. That voice had been taken by the machine. Psychic fire shimmered from Kaelus like a visible heat haze. Angron Unit 2 charged. In the system's view, Kaelus's vaunted speed was a joke. The Primarch's modified body moved faster. A long whip cracked out. Angron Unit 2 halted, pulled free his World Eater plasma gun, and let it sing. Kalis blinked at the speed, and as a keeper of secrets, pivoted with impossible grace to dodge. It closed with a taunt. "You missed." "Did I?" the system muttered to itself. Its true target had never been Kalis. Kabanda was the prize. Mortarion shambled forward, scythe raised. The jagged gap gaped in Kabanda's chest. Mortarion tried to finish him. Kabanda opened his vast mouth and bit at the scythe, but then the scythe chewed through tooth and jaw. Yellowish flesh and teeth collapsed onto the smoke-choked ground. "Watch out!" Sanguinius shouted, too late. Mortarion's broken body could not weave away. A toothed whip coiled around him, carving through carapace and bone. He knew it, saw it ripping at him, and his body did not obey him. Kabanda bore down like a beast, pleading for a kill. "I am the victor!" A non-human roar answered. Kabanda turned, and Kalis hurtled him, only to have its head clamped in Angron Unit 2's grip. At the same moment, a tremendous strike severed the whip around Mortarion. Angron Unit 2 scooped Mortarion up. "Cough, cough," Mortarion spat. "Put me down, I can still—" He never finished the word fight. Angron Unit 2 threw him aside like refuse. Sanguinius looked on helplessly as the wounded Primarch landed near him, battered and gasping. The system AI's voice was venomous in Angron's head. A cripple, a paralyzed waste. A fellow whose head isn't quite right? Is this what passes for leadership? What a Primarch. Angron felt the jibe. He had no answer. One waste, one pervert, 2 against 1. You'll be disabled for a long time. The system continued, cruel and clinical. It scanned the 2 Dark God Scions clawing their way up again. The corner of Angron Unit 2's mouth curled. "It's fine," Angron thought, and flashed back his reply. "But I don't like being bullied." Messages flooded in. "1st Gunship Squadron has reached the designated target. 37th Gunship Squadron has reached the designated target. This is Mago of the Fang of the Hounds, awaiting orders." Countless pings. The system barked, "Begin." Kabanda and Kalis shared a glance of pure loathing, and then both spun to face Angron Unit 2. The Primarch raised a defiant middle finger and roared. Angron Unit 2 stormed forward through the barrage. Kabanda and Kalis met him head-on. For a moment, the 2 Scions fought together, trying to overwhelm the Primarch. Angron Unit 2 took a massive axe blow, with the God of War's roar held high as a shield. The other hand wrenched Kalis's whip from its grip. He sidestepped an incoming shell. It slammed into Kalis and detonated, the heat rippling against Angron Unit 2's power field. Kalis scorched and staggered, but still came on, curved blade glittering. Cables erupted from behind Angron like a living forest. Kalis's psychic energy crashed into cold, gleaming physical cords and was trapped. One arm was crushed, the second had cables driven into it until the flesh gave way. The hand that held the blade shredded, only one arm remained held together by desperate warp power. "Who gave you the right to challenge me?" A voice thundered through Kalis's mind. Disgust and terror pounded at the Keeper of Secrets. Then, with a wet, incongruous sound, splat, the thing's head ruptured like a smashed fruit. The system registered the noise as though someone had shattered a watermelon. Volume 1, Chapter 192. "Tzeentch, I'm here to snatch the prize." Kalis's head sprang like a grotesque tree grown from raw data. The synaptic tendrils that crowned it blew apart in a spray of ichor and light. With Kalis dead, the battlefield held its breath. Kabanda looked down at the ruin of his erstwhile comrade and grinned with savage satisfaction. Angron felt the fog in his head lift. The system had absorbed and purged his surge of emotion. Clarity returned to him. Then a different power struck the ground, a raw red dominance that slammed into Kabanda and began to knit flesh and tendon back together. "This is the way of Khorne." Kabanda howled as wounds closed and rage swelled him like a second heart. He crouched, roaring at Angron Unit 2 like a maddened beast. Angron Unit 2 roared back, defiant, unbowed. "You, me, and the little angel," it thundered. "We all share desire and thirst for blood. Hatred and rage make us fight. Even if you resist now, you will be converted to my lord in time." The black mist that clung to Kabanda thickened, and his form swelled taller, more terrible. Angron's unease prickled, but in the system AI's cold calculus, a stronger enemy did not matter much. Enhancement? Fortification? Angron felt the system AI's emotion like a flicker of electricity. Nail was laughing. The God of War's roar swung in a blue-white blur. Angron Unit 2 became motion and light, his blood-red cloak snapping in the gust. The collision's shockwave shattered the surrounding decking. Kabanda planted his daemon axe and met the strike. "Whether it is you, the little angel, or even Mortarion," Kabanda bellowed, "the gods know the small darkness in your hearts. You fool yourselves." He tried to shake Angron's resolve, but he was wrong. Angron Unit 2's assault intensified, a relentless tempest. With every blow, 888, 889, the blessed warlord's body howled under the punishment. On the 889th strike, Angron finally found an opening and drove it home. Black claws lashed out. Kabanda snarled, certain of victory. Then a tide of data tendrils surged from behind Angron, snaking to the front and turning aside a crushing reply. As the tendrils coiled into Kabanda's arm, the material world itself seemed to dissolve his flesh. With a scream, Kabanda tore off his own limb to stop the corruption. He tried to snap at Angron's throat, only for Unit 2 to headbutt him backward. "Biting? A low-class move," the system AI mocked in Angron's mind. "Exactly," Nail replied. "I can do that too." Angron answered. "What are you going to do with my body, Nail?" Angron protested, but inside the soul world the two argued, and Nail simply took control. "Angron Unit 2, go Berserk," Nail ordered. "Wait, my brothers are watching." Helpless beneath Nail's control, Angron opened his maw. Kabanda watched impassively. "So what if you open your mouth?" "Dream on," Angron roared. Kabanda strained, but the count of tendrils only multiplied until his arms were trapped. Angron closed and clamped around him in a feral embrace, teeth sinking into neck and shoulder. Black blood spattered. Flesh was torn away as data tendrils pierced and pinned limbs to the decking. Angron hunched over the fallen daemon and ravenously gnawed. Sanguinius and Mortarion watched, stunned. The scene was not their brother, but some monster made from him. They could not tell where the Primarch ended and the beast began. A fresh blessing descended. The blood god himself, delighted by the carnage, poured favor onto Angron. This was exactly the performance he craved. Brutal, bloodthirsty, pure, unrefined violence. "Get lost." Nail threw the system AI's rejection of that blessing into the warp without hesitation. Khorne's joy turned to ecstasy. Wasn't this precisely the champion he had wanted? Kabanda lay gutted, arms gone, black blood spraying the floor as chunks of flesh were gnawed off. "Nail, enough! Enough!" Angron had his eyes closed. He could not bear to see it. The smell alone would disgust him later. Even when greater daemons were thrown at him, Angron Unit 2 crushed bone with his bare hands. His resistance to the warp in the physical universe was astonishing. Nail drove more tendrils into Kabanda's head, stabbing data into daemon sinew. The warp shrieked and the currents rolled back, expelled by the material plane. Nail felt a satisfaction in that exile, yet he sensed something else in the arrival of these greater demons. A psychic shriek split the air above Galaparis, and Nail reflexively cast black threads for defense, but another rupture punched at him from the front, and then he realized that imperial superhumans and imperial demigods pressed hot on his rear. This was Kabanda's final service. Angron Unit 2 hefted the demonic corpse, and a spherical psychic vortex struck it full. Kabanda wailed, his body dissolving under the psychic onslaught. He knew that power, the whispering, winding signature of the Lord of Change. "Lord of Change," he screamed. Tzeentch's voice echoed. The dark gods seethed. Khorne and Nurgle had been one step from seizing two imperial demigods, and now the Lord of Change moved to pluck the prize. All was proceeding as planned. The ethereal voice boomed through the warp. Malakath, the Lord of Change in a blue-scaled guise, stood above the scene, staff in hand, contemptuous and composed. He toyed with time itself, confident that his manipulations would drive the feuding into his net. As Kabanda's demon flesh liquefied and sloughs of black sludge fell away, another human skeleton emerged within the demon's hollow, an old prisoner bound within until the very last black nodal mass turned to dust. Malakath laughed. "All this is change." Around the battlefield, the flow of time stuttered. Korga felt the world slow, allies frozen in mid-stride. Into that stillness Malakath stepped, his staff a promise of irrevocable transformation. He fixed his gaze on Angron, who stubbornly resisted the temporal distortion and loosed a new power. Angron's head turned. Malakath's lips curled. "Foolish," he hissed. In this domain, what can an imperial demigod do? You can only— Die, heretic! Korga spat. With the last of his strength, leg bones shattered and bleeding, he lunged and stabbed a tiny wound into Malakath. The Tzeentch Lord, startled, flung Korga aside like a rag. Theseus scrambled to repair Korga's organs. Nails seized his chance and used data tendrils to fling the god of war's roar, Angron's axe, clear from the fight. Malakath snarled. He could not understand how these mortals still moved. He detonated the psychic trap that had been laid around Angron. Scorching mental fire licked at Unit 2, yet Angron staggered back into the fray, spinning and reeling, but not gone. Malakath thought he had matters contained and turned his icy scorn toward Sanguinius and Mortarion, but then a strange alien construct raced along the ground. Nail himself, accelerated into a living machine. Its shape was obscene and fast, a thing Malath briefly misidentified as a Slaneshi engine of torment. He could not keep pace. Time was part of physics too, and Nail exploited every trick. Nail hurtled toward Mortarion and Sanguinius. Mortarion, seeing the thing leap at his face, reflexively raised his war scythe and sent Nail sprawling against Sanguinius's visage. System AI and Sanguinius both stared at Mortarion in disbelief. Mortarion blinked, realized his error, and reached to pull the AI off the angel. Nail retaliated with a jolt of electricity, and Mortarion cursed. Nail! Angron's roar came from the edges of a psychic inferno. He staggered forward, burnt and broken, seeing Nail fold into Sanguinius's wing and vanish. Mortarion, blind to the nuance, shot a glance at Nail, then at the charging Malakath. He braced and took a psychic lash meant for the angel. Sorcerer! He roared. Nail drove further data tendrils, and one found Typhon on a nearby stretcher. You've slept too long. Wake, it made him. Typhon's eyes fluttered open to the chaos. Korga hurt, Mortarion about to be consumed by psychic flames. Instinct rose before thought. Psychic energy gathered in his hand. Mortarion looked at him with startled gratitude and raw urgency. Good tech, Typhon grunted, hearing the orders in the heat. Cover me! Mortarion barked. He slammed his scythe into the psychic blast before him. Bones in his arm cracked again. Two streams of psychic light flared in front of Mortarion as Typhon dug his fragile strength into a shield. Typhon! Mortarion rasped. Typhon's chest tightened. He did not know what the Primarch wanted to say, only that he could not fail in this moment. He grit his teeth and stood, throwing his psychic strength around Mortarion like a ragged cloak. If this defense failed, Typhon vowed, he would fall to the warhounds. For a heartbeat, the three demigods braced. The Lord of Change's laughter peeled like cold knives. Even without lavish boons, the three were pushed to their limits. As Malakath expected, Mortarion was pinned by his sorcery, and Typhon was knocked aside by a single vicious mental slap. Angron arrived, staggering and whirling, but still standing. Victory seemed at hand. Malakath's bird face split into a grotesque grin as he strode past Mortarion and raised his staff. Little angel, now you are ours, he intoned. You shall receive supreme change. Sanguinius's voice cut through the clamor like a sword. I refuse. Volume 1, Chapter 194, The Golden Angel. The thirst ebbed away, as cold circuits ran from his wings into his mind, and a frigid voice threaded through his soul. Sanguinius perceived something subtle. In the ocean of consciousness shared with his sons, the restless, bloodthirsty echoes of his scions were finding peace. He did not understand why. Data synapses creaked as they traced down his leg bones. Golden cables lay along his wings, gleaming, denser filaments braided across his breastplate. Calm, tranquility. The angel could sense everything. He stretched out a hand. A red longsword sprang from his wrist, and he rose to his feet. What are you? He asked. Shut up, little angel, came the dry reply of the system. I will not submit to you, Sanguinius answered. I have no interest in you or your poorly kept secret, the voice said. Kill him, and then I will leave. Your connection with your scions is impressive. The system AI constantly parsed those genetic links. The Blood Angels, noble warriors though they were, swam in a constant undercurrent of bloodlust that Sanguinius now felt he could touch at will. You go fight. I'll take care of your children's bloodthirst, the system added. Only temporarily, of course. Those two sentences silenced Sanguinius as if by command. He lifted his gaze and straightened. His golden wings unfurled with a whisper, broad pinions spreading, and not a single feather fell. The Blood Guard and the rest of the Blood Angels clustered around him. Where frenzy had lurked, there was only quiet. Though the Gene Father had not spoken a word aloud, his voice filled the sons' souls. "Blood angels, assemble," he projected. They fell into formation like feathers into a wing, weapons raised, their eyes fixed on the Primarch's foe. "Attack!" The angel led his crimson sons against Malakath. The assault took even the Changer of Ways by surprise. He lowered his hooded gaze, brandished his staff, and muttered strange syllables. His hooked beak gave a hoarse cry. Psychic cold radiated outward even as scorching flame licked the air. "For Sanguinius," the Blood Angels answered. Ascalon held the left flank. The chainsword in his hand threw off a mist of red. The strength of father and battle brothers filled him with a fierce courage. The Blood Guard swung as one. A bloody aura rolled outward. Malakath had never seen anything like it. Raw, pure rage, the power of crimson thirst unbound. For a moment he mistook it for the Blood God's blessing, then realized these angels had not bent a knee to Khorne. They fought for their Gene Father. The Blood God's influence struck Malakath's psychic bulwarks, and his proud sorcery splintered. He staggered, disbelief twisting his face. The dark gods watched through the veil. Khorne, exultant, thought to claim them, bloodlust made manifest, perfectly suited. He offered blessings, more, greater, and was rebuffed. "Lord Sanguinius, this is Ladoron of the First Company," crackled a voice over the comm. Sanguinius straightened. His face was calm and resolute beneath the shining filaments. His golden hair glinted as he spoke gently, his voice like sunlight caught on steel. "My child, I am here. The Xenos are retreating, the brothers of the Death Company." Ladoron hesitated, the next words heavy. "My lord, the veterans who entered the Death Company, they have recovered their sanity. I wanted to know if you had any insight." Sanguinius looked stunned for a heartbeat, then the corner of his mouth lifted into a rapt smile. He pressed a hand to his face, golden hair drifting with the motion. He felt them, the returned sons, their minds whole again. "Did you do this?" he asked. "A little technological assistance," the system replied. "Is this how you suppress the Warhound's desires?" "Warhounds? Not difficult. I cannot rewrite genetics, but I can stimulate the physical. The soul, under certain circumstances, is part of the material. With your power to adjust it, that is enough." The system's tone turned almost indulgent. "Want to learn? I'll teach you, little angel, though you probably won't learn it. Hurry, after this fight, I need to check Angron Unit 2's physical condition. Go fight Unit 9. The words tightened Sanguinius's wings. Data synapses ran over his face. A golden mask came into being. The golden angel stood on the field, wings beating, crimson longsword leveled at Malakath. "Xenos," he said coldly, "go back." Malakath stared, terror bleeding across his features as he saw the metallic construct under those wings. A ripple in the great destiny, a new variable. He laughed to cover the fear. "Sanguinius, do you think that thing on you can save you?" "It enslaves you," Sanguinius replied, "but we will not lie. It will be the chain of your tragic fate." "Embrace the Lord of Change. That is your only destiny," Malakath sneered. Sanguinius was silent. He felt the air, each scion's soul, and a revulsion at the thing Malakath served. "Are you finished?" he asked. "If so, it is time to send you on your way." A ribbon of golden light flashed. Malakath never saw the angel's speed. Modules engaged. Sanguinius felt at once as if he controlled everything. The crimson blade seemed to think with him. The Blood Angels and their Gene Father moved as one. Every spell Malakath cast was cleaved apart, every invocation dissolved by the combined will of Primarch and Legion. "Your time is up," Sanguinius roared, driving the crimson blade into Malakath's psychic shield. Volume 1, Chapter 195. Sanguinius, quick, take the nails and run. The Ghoul Legion, the old name, the Ghoul Legion, lingered like a memory of darker days. Sanguinius had returned, and the infamy had faded, but the genetic flaws had gnawed at his heart. Now there was hope for a cure. In time, he thought, the Blood Angels would be the proudest legion of the Imperium. For now, he watched Malakath as the Primarch's strike shattered the demon's psychic defense. The creature's face contorted in sudden, animal terror. The Blood Angels poured their crimson power in from both flanks, distorting space as they closed. The angel looked down at demon blood seeping into the soil. Malakath gasped. Cold sweat slicked his plumage. His chest gaped where the blade had pierced him. How could this be? Had not Kabanda and Kalis, greater daemons, once grievously wounded the angel, the odds had shifted, and Malakath could not make sense of it. "Is that all you can do?" Sanguinius asked, voice ice. "Is that your power?" Another voice cut through the chaos. Angron. The red-eyed warlord stepped forward, his flesh a map of fresh wounds. He hefted his cruel and stood behind Malakath, cutting off the daemon's retreat. Sanguinius did not reply to Angron. He barely seemed to have heard. Heavy breathing announced Mortarion as he forced himself up, leaning on his scythe. Even shattered bones had not kept the Reaper from finishing the battle. Typhon stood behind Mortarion, psychic shields curled around his old friend like a second skin. "How long can your technology and energy last?" Mortarion asked, turning to Typhon. "I'm not sure. I'll do my best," Typhon said. Mortarion nodded, satisfied. Trust between the Death Guard required no words. Malakath finally understood the depth of the danger. He should have waited, should have lured them into a trap. Who knew these imperial demigods had so many hidden cards? He tried to provoke them. "You are not human. Your father made you tools. And what is a tool's fate? To be discarded." The daemon jeered and offered conversion to the Lord of Change, as if that were salvation. The taunt only made Angron's eyes flash. He lashed out, an axe strike aimed straight for Malakath's head. The daemon replied by turning the ground into a sinking quagmire beneath Angron's feet. Psychic ripples answered Mortarion's war scythe, but even at his limit, the scythe struck with unerring force. Malakath dodged. He would not be felled by mere mortal weapons. "Do you only know brute force?" he mocked. "Frail weaklings." Mockery could be met in kind. The Blood Angels had never fought with such exultation. The darkness they had always suppressed now became fuel. For a moment, they saw the so-called flaw in themselves as a font of power. As Kalon and his squad tore at Malakath's weave of sorcery, rage spread across Azkeelan's set face as bolter fire mixed with blood lashed the daemon's barriers. "You seek to tempt us into falling?" Sanguinius thundered, driving his command like a lance. "Blood Angels, never fall!" The voice cracked something open in them. Tears sprang to many eyes, but not of fear, of release. They answered his cry with one, a war cry that echoed their Gene Father's resolve. Layer upon layer of Malakath's psychic defenses splintered. Azkelon's chainsword dove toward the daemon. Malakath raised his staff, a last shape of defiance. He would not be destroyed by mere mortals. He would not yield.